I was told my brother's wedding had been cancelled, then I saw my entire family smiling in someone else's photos. The first picture I saw was my mom, smiling so hard her eyes were almost shut, standing under a white flower arch with a champagne glass in her hand. She was wearing the navy wrap dress I had gone with her to buy at Nordstrom 2 weekends earlier. The wedding she told me had been cancelled was happening in that picture. I'm 34, my brother Ryan is 30. And until last fall I would have told anyone he was the person in my family I trusted most. We grew up in Dublin, outside Columbus, in one of those neighborhoods where every driveway had a basketball hoop and every mom knew everyone else's business by dinner. Ryan and I were the two older kids. Our younger sister Kelsey is 27 and has always been the easy one. The one who can float through family drama by smiling and saying, "I'm staying out of it," while very clearly not staying out of it. Ryan and I were close in the real way, not the fake social media sibling way. He used to call me when he was in high school and didn't want to ask our dad stuff. I was the one he texted when he got his first apartment and realized nobody tells you shower curtains and trash cans don't magically appear. When he got dumped senior year of college, he drove to my condo in Cincinnati and slept on my couch for 2 nights. And I sat there with him eating takeout Thai food while he acted like his life was over because some girl named Morgan had stopped replying. When he started dating Madison, I was genuinely happy for him. She was polished in a way Ryan always liked. Pretty without trying too hard, or at least looking like she wasn't trying too hard. Blonde, Pilates body, worked in marketing for a home design company. Always had fresh white nails and a clean neutral outfit on. The kind of woman who says things like, "I just threw this on," while wearing a perfectly oversized cashmere sweater and gold hoops that probably cost $300. The first few times I met her, I liked her. She was friendly, asked questions, laughed at my jokes. Ryan was crazy about her. He moved to Chicago for work a few years before, and they met at a rooftop birthday party in River North. Within 6 months, they had a dog together. Within a year, they were shopping for a condo. By the time they got engaged, nobody in the family was surprised. I thought I was going to be one of the people most involved in the wedding. Ryan called me the night he bought the ring. He FaceTimed me from his car outside a jeweler because he needed a witness to this financial crime. I helped Madison narrow down bridesmaid dress colors because she couldn't decide between eucalyptus, sage, and some other green that looked exactly the same to me. I went to the bridal shower. I addressed invitations one Friday night with my mom and Kelsey while we drank cheap Prosecco and complained about people who put +1 on RSVP cards. I also gave Ryan and Madison $3,000 for the photographer. I'm not saying that to sound noble. I'm saying it because it mattered later. And because it's still one of the parts that makes me feel the stupidest. Ryan didn't ask in some manipulative way. He called me one evening in April, sounding embarrassed, and said their budget had gotten tight because Madison's parents were covering a lot less than expected. He said the one thing Madison really cared about was photos and video because she wanted something beautiful to look back on. He actually said, "You know how she is about all that stuff. I make good money. I'm a nurse practitioner now, and I don't have kids." Ryan knew I was comfortable. He said, "Please don't feel pressured. Seriously, I'm just venting." Which, in my family, is exactly how people ask for things. So I offered. He resisted for maybe 30 seconds, then accepted like a man accepting a life raft. He told me over and over that he'd pay me back if he could. I told him it was a wedding gift and not to be weird. At the time, I meant it. The reason any of this became so complicated goes back 3 years. And unfortunately, the villain of that part of the story is my cousin Ashley. Ashley is 32, my Aunt Carol's daughter. And she has been one of those women who makes every room feel like a contest since we were teenagers. Not outwardly. She's too slick for that. She's the kind of person who compliments you in a way that somehow leaves you feeling uglier. I could never pull off bangs, but they're cute on you. You're so brave for wearing a swimsuit like that, that kind of thing. I was married before. My ex-husband Ethan and I were together for 6 years, married for almost 4. I thought we were solid. We had a condo, a dog, routines, joint Costco membership energy. Then during a family 4th of July weekend at a lake house in Michigan, I found out he'd been sleeping with Ashley for months. I wish I had some dramatic cinematic way of saying I discovered it. But really I saw texts pop up on his iPad when he was in the shower. Then I went looking because I already knew. You always know before you admit you know. The fallout was exactly as humiliating as you'd imagine. There was crying, screaming, my aunt pretending she was shocked. Ashley telling me, it just happened. Which is such an insane phrase people use for months-long affairs. Ethan kept saying he never meant to hurt me. As if he had accidentally backed his car into my emotional life. Ryan was on my side then. Completely. He helped me pack Ethan's stuff into contractor bags. He drove me home from my lawyer's office when I couldn't stop crying long enough to see straight. For a while, he stopped speaking to Ashley. He even stopped speaking to Aunt Carol when she tried to turn it into a both sides thing. But families are rarely clean about betrayal. They get tired of tension. They get bored. They want holidays to feel easy again. My mom, Linda, is the queen of acting like the worst part of any situation is the awkwardness. Afterward, not the actual harm, the awkwardness. She loves phrases like, life is too short, which always somehow means I'm supposed to be the one swallowing broken glass. So everyone else can eat ham in peace at Christmas. Within a year, my mom had started inviting Aunt Carol and Ashley to things again. Then it became, Ashley will only be there for dessert. Then, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Then, you don't have to speak to her. Like my options were either embrace my lying cousin or be accused of ruining Thanksgiving. I pulled back hard from most of my family after that. Not fully no contact, but I stopped going to anything where Ashley would be there. I saw my parents one-on-one sometimes. I saw Ryan and Kelsey separately. Ryan told me he understood. He said I shouldn't have to sit across a dinner table from two people who blew up my marriage. That's why what happened with his wedding knocked the air out of me so completely. It didn't come from the people I expected. It came from the one person who had seen the worst of it up close. Ryan and Madison planned their wedding for early September at a winery outside Traverse City. It was one of those places built to look rustic while being wildly expensive. White barn, strings of lights, little black signs with elegant calligraphy. Welcome bags at the hotel with local coffee and mini aspirin bottles for hangovers. Madison was obsessed with the venue. She sent a family group text every few weeks with updated details nobody needed. Like linen textures and signature cocktails. I was supposed to fly in Thursday night. I had already booked my flight from Milwaukee to Grand Rapids, then a rental car for the drive. I had my dress altered. I had my PTO approved. I had the gift from their registry shipped to their condo. And I had a backup card with cash because my mom always says cash feels more substantial. About 6 weeks before the wedding, Kelsey casually mentioned Ashley's name on the phone. She was talking about seating charts, and she said, I just hope there's not weirdness if Ashley and Ethan end up near Dad's side. I actually stopped walking in the middle of the grocery store. I was in the yogurt aisle, holding Greek yogurt like an idiot, and I said, what do you mean, if Ashley and Ethan end up near Dad's side? There was this tiny pause where I knew she had screwed up. Then she said, too fast, I thought you knew. I did not know. I got off with her and called Ryan immediately. He didn't pick up. I called again. Then he texted, in a meeting. What's up? So I wrote, are Ashley and Ethan invited to your wedding? He called me within a minute. He sounded tense right away. Why are we doing this right now? That answer alone told me everything. I said, because apparently Kelsey thinks I already know my cheating ex-husband and the cousin he cheated with are invited to my brother's wedding. He exhaled hard. Claire, it's not like that. I hate that phrase almost as much as, it just happened. I said, then tell me what it's like. He started doing verbal gymnastics immediately. Ashley had apparently gotten close with Madison over the last year through family stuff and a mutual friend in Chicago. Ethan was back in the picture socially because he and Ryan had run into each other at a golf outing. Through work, which I did not know and did not enjoy learning in real time. Aunt Carol had apparently made a comment about how she wouldn't come if Ashley was deliberately excluded. Madison didn't want unnecessary drama around guest politics. My mom had said it would look cruel to specifically ban Ashley when they were inviting the rest of that side of the family. I said, so the solution was to invite the woman who slept with my husband. And him too. Ryan said, I was going to tell you. I said, when? He had no answer for that. Then he switched to the tone people use when they're trying to make your reaction the problem. He said, I need you to understand this wedding is not about what happened to you 3 years ago. That sentence changed something in me. Not because I thought his wedding was about me. It obviously wasn't. but because what had happened to me was apparently, in his mind, some stale piece of drama I was keeping alive for fun. Not the reason I got divorced. Not the reason I spent a year in therapy learning how to exist in grocery stores without panicking. When I saw a man built like Ethan from behind, I told Ryan very calmly that if Ashley and Ethan were going to be there, I would not be. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to show up and cry into the cake. I just wasn't going to attend a wedding where my brother wanted me smiling in family photos next to the two people who detonated my marriage. He got angry then, not loud, but cold. He said, "So you're really going to do this to me?" I said, "Do what?" "Have a boundary." He said Madison was already stressed. And could I please not make him choose between his sister and his future wife's guest list? I said, "You already chose." We hung up badly. For the next week, my phone turned into a family referendum on whether I was being unreasonable. My mom called and said, "Can you just be civil for one day?" My dad said, "You don't have to interact with anyone you don't want to." Kelsey, who is allergic to accountability, said, "I see both sides." Only one person in the whole mess acknowledged the real issue. My grandmother, my dad's mom, called me from Florida and said, "If they wanted you there, they would make it safe for you to be there." Then she added, "Your mother has always preferred peace over loyalty." That was exactly it. A few days later, Ryan called me again. This time he sounded tired and weirdly gentle. He said he'd talked to Madison and they understood where I was coming from. He said Ashley and Ethan would not be included after all, at least not at the wedding itself. Maybe they'd see them another time, maybe at a future family event, but not there. He said, "I want my sister at my wedding." I asked him directly, "Are you telling me the truth?" He said yes. I asked if Madison was okay with it. He said, "She'll get over it." I shouldn't have believed him that easily, but I wanted to. I wanted my brother back. I wanted that disgusting, exhausting little chapter to be closed. So I said okay. I rebooked nothing because nothing needed rebooking. I kept my flight. I kept the hotel block room. I went to the final dress fitting. My mom and I had lunch the weekend before the wedding, and she acted completely normal. She showed me shoes she had ordered for the rehearsal dinner. She asked if I thought she should wear her hair up or down. We talked about whether Dad's suit needed hemming. If she felt even a flicker of guilt, she hid it better than I thought she could. Then, 11 days before the wedding, my mom called me on a Tuesday morning while I was between patients. She was crying, not loud crying, soft, controlled crying, the kind people do when they know they're being listened to. She said Madison's aunt had a medical emergency in Arizona and things were up in the air. Then by that afternoon the story had changed slightly. Now it was Madison's dad having chest pain. By evening, when Ryan texted, it had settled into a cleaner version. There had been a family emergency on Madison's side and the wedding was being cancelled. Maybe postponed. They didn't know yet. They were devastated. They just wanted privacy. It was messy enough to be believable. I called Ryan. He sounded awful. Flat, drained, just saying, "I can't really talk." Madison never contacted me directly, which I thought was odd, but not impossible. My mom sent a whole dramatic paragraph into the family group chat about how some things are bigger than celebrations. Kelsey put a white heart and a praying hands emoji. My dad didn't say much, which was normal. I texted Ryan that I loved him and I was sorry. He hearted the message. That should have been the moment I got suspicious, but honestly I just felt bad for them. Weddings are giant expensive stress bombs. Family emergency or not, I thought they must be miserable. I cancelled my rental car. I ate the flight cost because it was a non-refundable basic economy ticket and I couldn't be bothered to fight with an airline over $87. I put my dress in the back of my closet. The wedding weekend came and I stayed home. Friday night I ordered sushi and watched bad reality TV in sweatpants. Saturday I cleaned my kitchen, half listened to a podcast, and felt sorry for my brother. Around 6 that evening, I was lying on my couch scrolling Instagram in that numb, mindless way people do, and I saw a story from a woman named Jenna Holloway. I only knew Jenna because she was one of Madison's bridesmaids and had followed me after the bridal shower. I had never met her in person more than a quick hi. But I remembered the name because she was one of those women who has a whole life that looks beige and expensive online. Candlelit kitchens, wine tastings, engagement photos in fields. Her story was just a repost from somebody else. A makeup artist, I think. It showed 3 women in satin robes clinking champagne flutes in front of big hotel windows. Madison was one of them. I sat up so fast I dropped my phone on my chest. At first I actually convinced myself it had to be old content. Pre-wedding stuff. Maybe something the makeup artist posted from a trial run. Then I tapped to the next story. There was Madison in a white dress. The next one was the venue, lit up with string lights. The next one was Ryan at the altar. Then there was a photo dump posted by a wedding planner account that Jenna had tagged. It was public, maybe not meant for me to see, but public enough that I could. And there they all were. My parents, Kelsey, my Aunt Carol, Ashley in a pale blue dress, laughing with a hand on Madison's shoulder. Ethan in a gray suit standing next to Ryan like they were old friends. My father smiling in family photos. My mother with her arm around Ashley. Everybody looking soft and happy and perfectly untroubled in the wedding that had supposedly been cancelled. I don't know how long I sat there staring. It sounds dramatic, but my body went cold. Not metaphorically. I started shaking so hard I had to set my phone on the coffee table because I couldn't hold it steady. It wasn't even just anger at first. It was something more humiliating than anger. It was that sick, flattening feeling of realizing a whole group of people had coordinated a lie about your own place in their lives. It wasn't that they chose a wedding over me. It was that they decided I did not even deserve the truth. The detail that gutted me most was the family portrait. It was taken out on the lawn at golden hour. My parents in the middle, Kelsey and her husband on one side, Ryan and Madison in front. Aunt Carol and Ashley on the other side. Even my dad's sister and her kids were there. It looked full, finished, like one of those photos people frame over a fireplace and point to years later when they talk about good times. There was no visible absence in it, no space where I should have been. They had composed a version of the family that worked just fine without me. I called Ryan right away. No answer. I called my mom, straight to voicemail. I called Kelsey. She picked up on the third ring and said, "Hey," in that breathless voice people use when they've just stepped away from a table. I said, "Where are you?" There was silence for maybe 2 seconds. Then she said, "Claire?" I said, "Don't. Where are you?" She said, very quietly, "At the wedding." I laughed, not because anything was funny. Because my brain had nowhere else to send the shock. I said, "I know you're at the wedding. I can see the wedding. I want to hear you say why all of you told me it was cancelled." She started crying immediately, which made me angrier. Kelsey cries the way some people hit mute. It stops the conversation because now everyone has to deal with her feelings instead of the thing she did. She kept saying, "I didn't want to lie to you," and "Mom said it was the easiest way," and "I thought Ryan would call you after." After what? After they finished cake cutting? After the sparkler exit? After everyone sobered up? I said, "Put Mom on the phone." She said she couldn't. I could hear music in the background and people talking. Then she said the sentence that is burned into my head now. "Please don't ruin this tonight." Ruin this. As if the wedding existed in a pristine state until I noticed my own exclusion. I hung up on her and called my mom again. This time she answered. She sounded furious that I had breached the wall of the lie. Not guilty, not panicked, furious. "Claire, this is not the time." I said, "No, apparently the time was 11 days ago when you all decided to tell me my brother's wedding was cancelled." She said, "You were not left out to be cruel." I said, "Then why was I left out?" She said, "Because there was no solution that would make everyone happy." I actually said, "Are you hearing yourself?" Then it all came out in pieces. Ashley had in fact been invited all along. Madison had refused to disinvite her because they were close now. Ethan came as Ashley's guest. Ryan was afraid I'd either back out publicly or show up and be upset, which would change the energy of the weekend. My mother decided the least disruptive option was to tell me the wedding had been called off. My dad went along with it. Kelsey went along with it. Ryan went along with it. Even my aunt and probably half the extended family went along with it. Or at minimum agreed to keep quiet. I said, "So all of you sat there and decided I was the problem to solve?" My mom snapped, "The problem was that you refused to move on." That sentence brought me from shaking hurt straight into a kind of crystal clear anger I had not felt in a long time. I said, "No, the problem is that you are so addicted to pretending everything is fine that you'll lie to your own daughter instead of admitting you chose the side that's more convenient." She said I was making the wedding about myself. I said, "You made it about me the second you invented a fake cancellation instead of telling the truth." At some point Ryan took the phone. I could hear people outside, maybe near the reception barn. He sounded drunk or close to it. Not sloppy, just loose and emotional in that way people get when their adrenaline starts dropping. He said, I was going to call you tomorrow. I said, and say what, exactly? He said, that we had a small ceremony after all. That made me go dead silent. Because think about that, the plan was not even to confess. The plan was apparently to continue insulting my intelligence with some version of events where I was supposed to believe they had quietly thrown together a formal wedding with a florist, a planner, full bridal party, and a photographer after canceling the big one. I said, do you even hear how disgusting this is? Ryan started crying then. Real crying, to be fair. He said he felt trapped. Madison was furious whenever my name came up. Mom kept saying there was no way to handle it without conflict. He didn't want to start his marriage with a huge family blow-up. He kept using the phrase, I just wanted one peaceful day. And I said, you got it. You just had to erase me to get there. He didn't deny that. I told him I hoped the photos were worth it, and I hung up. I turned my phone off after that because messages started coming in fast. Kelsey, my dad, even Madison, who had never bothered to contact me when the wedding was supposedly canceled. Her message said, I know emotions are high. But I hope someday you understand we were in an impossible position. An impossible position. There were actually several possible positions. One was telling me the truth and accepting I wouldn't attend. Another was choosing not to invite Ashley and Ethan. Another was Ryan acting like a grown man and deciding his sister mattered. They picked the one that required the maximum amount of deception and the minimum amount of courage. The next morning, I turned my phone back on and had 23 texts and 4 voicemails. My dad's voicemail was basically, please don't cut us all off over one bad decision. My aunt, bizarrely, texted me that she always loved me and hoped I knew. These things get messy. Ashley had the audacity to send nothing at all, which was probably wise because if she had, I might have driven to Columbus and committed a felony. Ryan texted me a long apology that read like it had been workshopped by a committee. Lots of passive constructions. Mistakes were made. Nobody wanted to hurt you. We were trying to protect everyone. It never acknowledged the simple truth that he lied to me because he wanted my absence more than my presence. I replied with one message to Ryan only. I said, do not contact me again unless it is to return the money I gave you for the photographer. He responded almost instantly, Claire, it was a gift. I wrote back, number. It was money I gave my brother because I thought I was his family. He never sent it. That part actually became its own ugly little side issue because my mother later called me mercenary for asking for it back. She said, you can't put conditions on a gift after the fact. I said, you can't take someone's money for wedding photos while planning to crop them out of the wedding. Over the next 2 weeks, more details came out. Mostly because people in families love secrets right up until they don't get to control how they're told. My cousin Megan, who had been at the wedding and was one of the few decent people there, called me privately. She said she had assumed I chose not to attend because of Ashley. She had no idea I'd been told the wedding was cancelled until my mother mentioned at brunch the next morning that I was taking space. Megan told me people had definitely noticed I wasn't there. My grandmother had apparently called from Florida during the reception because she'd seen a Facebook post and realized she'd been lied to as well. She's in her 80s, sharp as a blade, and according to Megan she told my mother, you should be ashamed of yourself, then hung up. I loved her so much in that moment it hurt. Megan also told me the lie hadn't even been uniformly managed. Some people had been told I was sick. Some were told I had a work emergency. Some thought I was on bad terms with Madison. My family had not just cut me out. They had turned me into a rumor. Then Madison's cousin, who I had met at the shower and apparently liked me, sent me one of the photos privately with no message, almost like evidence. I'm still not sure why. In that picture, Ryan was standing at a high-top table with Ethan. Both of them laughing at something, beers in hand, while Ashley stood next to my mother. That was maybe worse than the formal portraits. A portrait can be staged. A candid tells the truth. I sat with all of it for a while before I responded to anyone beyond basic logistical things. I went to work. I charted notes. I picked up groceries. I walked my dog. There is something deeply surreal about ordinary adult life continuing while your insides feel scorched. A patient asked me one morning if I had kids. And I almost started crying in an exam room because my brain was so overloaded that even harmless conversation felt dangerous. About 3 weeks later, my parents drove to Milwaukee without asking and showed up at my condo. If anyone wonders where Ryan gets his aversion to honest conversation, it's from Linda and Greg, who always prefer emotional ambushes over direct communication. My building buzzed, and there they were downstairs with those tense little expectant faces. Like they were heroes arriving to clean up a misunderstanding. I almost didn't let them in. I only did because I didn't want a scene in the lobby. My mom walked in holding a bakery box, which was so absurd I almost laughed. Like maybe cinnamon rolls would bridge the gap between family tension and we faked a cancellation so we could attend a wedding without you. We sat at my kitchen table. My dad kept rubbing his knees. My mom kept glancing around my condo like she was evaluating whether my hurt was visible in the decor. She started with, "We handled it badly." I said, "That is an insane understatement." Dad said, "Your mother means we were wrong." I said, "Were you?" Mom stiffened a little and then said, "Yes, but I still think if you look at the big picture, we were trying to avoid a terrible confrontation." I said, "With who?" She didn't answer that directly. Because the answer was not me. The answer was Ashley, or Madison, or Aunt Carol, or anybody who might make a scene if asked to adjust. I was simply the safest person to hurt because I had a history of swallowing it. Dad finally admitted something useful. He said Ashley had apparently threatened not to come if I did, because she felt I was hostile to her. I just stared at him. Hostile to the cousin who slept with my husband. My mom jumped in and said, "You always get this look when her name comes up." I said, "What look should I get?" Then came the real core of it. My mom said Madison had been adamant that she did not want tension in wedding photos. At the reception, at the hotel, anywhere. She said Madison felt I brought heaviness into rooms lately and that Ryan, as the groom, deserved a carefree weekend. That hurt, but honestly it also clarified everything. Because it told me that this wasn't just about Ashley. It was about me no longer performing pleasantness on command. I was acceptable when I could be the competent older sister writing checks, giving tasteful registry gifts, helping with shower invitations, and quietly absorbing humiliations in the name of family unity. The minute I became someone with limits, I became inconvenient. I asked my dad if he agreed with all that. He looked me straight in the face and said, "No, but I thought after the wedding we could all fix it." That was maybe the saddest thing anybody said to me through all of this. Not because it was cruel. Because it was weak. It was the worldview of someone who thinks betrayal is an event and not a new shape the relationship takes. I told them both to leave. My mom cried. My dad looked tired. Neither of them fought me much, which somehow made it worse. Since then, I've barely spoken to any of them. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with my friend Dana and her wife in Madison, Wisconsin, eating sweet potatoes and drinking too much Pinot Noir while their twins ran circles around the dining room table. My phone buzzed with a text from Kelsey around noon that said, "Miss you." I didn't answer. Ryan sent a Christmas gift to my condo in December. An expensive candle set from Diptyque and a card that said, "Love you always." I mailed it back unopened. In January, he finally transferred me $1,500 with no note. Not the full amount. Just $1,500. That almost made me laugh because it was so exactly Ryan, even in remorse. Trying to split the difference between apology and self-protection. I sent it back with the memo line, "Not enough for what you did." A week later he sent the rest. We have not spoken since. The weirdest part is how often people want reconciliation to be tidy when the injury was so specifically ugly. Friends have said things like, "He's still your brother." My aunt texted me on my birthday that family is forever, which is rich coming from a woman who raised Ashley. Even my therapist, who I generally like, asked at one point what I would need to see from Ryan to believe repair was possible. And I honestly don't know. It's not just that he picked other people. People do that all the time in families. It's that he sat in the middle of a coordinated lie and let me comfort him over a fake cancellation. He let me say I loved him and that I was sorry his wedding had fallen apart while he knew he was still getting married on schedule. He accepted my empathy while stealing the truth from me. That's what I can't smooth over. A few months ago, I made the mistake of looking at the wedding photos again after Megan mentioned the album was still on the photographer's website. I don't know why I looked. Self-harm comes in a lot of socially acceptable forms, I guess. The pictures were beautiful. Of course they were. That's what $3,000 gets you. Golden light, polished makeup, champagne towers, candid laughter, all of it. There was one photo of Ryan and Madison walking back down the aisle. both smiling so big they looked like they were starring in a commercial for happiness. There was another of my mom dabbing at her eyes during the ceremony. There was a reception shot where Ashley was on the dance floor with my dad, both of them grinning. And there I was nowhere. Not even in the edges. I thought it would make me sad all over again, but mostly it made me feel calm in a bleak way. Because photographs tell the truth and lie at the same time. The truth is that they really did have a perfect day, at least visually. The lie is that you'd never know what it cost by looking at them. Ryan and Madison bought a house in the suburbs this spring. I heard that from Kelsey through Dana. Because apparently my life now has a weird relay system for family information. Madison is pregnant, I think. Or trying to be. My mom has resumed posting inspirational quotes and brunch photos like nothing happened. Ashley and Ethan got engaged in March. I found that out because Aunt Carol put a giant ring emoji in a caption and 3 people texted me. As if they were alerting me to severe weather. Sometimes I think the worst thing my family did wasn't excluding me from the wedding. It was showing me, with absolute clarity, how they solve discomfort. They locate the person least likely to explode, ask the most of them, and then call it maturity. For years, that person was me. Not anymore. The last message I ever got from Ryan that felt real came late one night in February. After the money was fully returned. No preamble, no big brother-sister nostalgia bait, no group-approved apology language. Just one sentence. I was a coward, and I knew it while I was doing it. I read it 3 times. I never replied. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe there's some future where enough time passes and we sit across from each other in some neutral place, drinking mediocre coffee. And he says whatever he should have said the first night I called. Maybe my mom gets older and softer. Maybe my dad stops letting life happen around him and starts naming things correctly. Maybe Kelsey grows a spine. Maybe Ashley disappears from the orbit. Maybe none of that happens. All I know is that on the night I saw those photos, something finished breaking. And once you've seen your whole family smiling inside a lie they built for you, it gets very hard to pretend you're still standing in the same place with them. Story number 2. My husband said the camera was broken. The repair technician whispered, "Don't delete anything." The camera was one of the first grown-up things my husband and I bought together after we got married. Not a couch, not a grill, not one of those ugly practical things you hate spending money on. A camera, a nice Sony mirrorless one with 2 lenses and a padded black bag and a strap. Grant insisted we needed because, if we're going to have kids someday, I want real pictures, not blurry phone junk. That was 10 years ago, back when he still said things like someday and meant us. I'm 34 now. My husband Grant is 38. We live in Cary, North Carolina, in one of those neighborhoods full of white trim, hydrangeas, Pelotons, Amazon packages, and little packs of kids on scooters after dinner. We have a 6-year-old daughter, Lucy, who still says, "aminals," instead of animals when she's tired and likes to wear glitter sneakers. With everything, including pajamas if you let her. From the outside, our life probably looked like the exact kind of thing people pretend not to compare themselves to online and then absolutely do. Nice house, good school district, family beach trips to Bald Head every summer. Grant in quarter zips and loafers, me pretending our mudroom would stay organized this time. We had Christmas card pictures every year. We hosted people for chili in the fall and burgers by the patio in the spring. We had a golden retriever named Poppy that sheds like it's her full-time job. And for a long time, I really thought we were okay. Not perfect, not movie perfect, real life okay. The kind where you fight about money and schedules and whose turn it is to deal with the plumber. But you still text each other from Costco asking if you need paper towels. The last year had been rough, though. That's the part one keep replaying now because I still do that stupid thing people do after betrayal. Where they go back through old scenes trying to decide when they became a fool. My mom had a breast cancer scare last fall. It ended up being early stage and treatable, thank God. But those weeks of biopsies and waiting messed me up more than I admitted at the time. I'm an interior designer, mostly residential. And I work from home unless I'm at installs or meetings. So I was the one driving to appointments with her in Raleigh. Sitting in cold little exam rooms that smelled like sanitizer and coffee, smiling too much. Pretending I was calm. At the same time, Grant was traveling more for work. He's in medical sales, and every quarter there's some new pressure, some new product rollout. Some new reason he has to be in Charlotte or Atlanta or on a plane at 6 in the morning. He started coming home late more often. Not every night, just enough to make me notice. He got protective of his phone in a way that felt subtle until I looked back and realized it really wasn't. He started taking it into the shower. He turned the screen down when he sat next to me. If I asked who texted, he'd say, "Nobody important," in that easy voice people use when they definitely do not want follow-up questions. If I had been telling this story about anyone else, I would say all the usual things. I knew. I had a feeling. Women always know. But honestly, I didn't. Not fully. I thought maybe he was stressed. I thought maybe we were in that ugly middle stretch a lot of married people hit in their 30s. Where nobody's cheating, nobody's leaving, everybody's just tired and a little disappointed. I also think I was so busy holding everything else together that I did not want to open one more thing. Brooke didn't help. Brooke lived 4 houses down from us. She was 35, blonde in that expensive effortless way, always tan. Always in a matching tennis set or leggings with a denim jacket tossed over it. Her twin boys were in Lucis grade. Her husband Tyler worked in commercial banking and traveled almost as much as Grant did. Which was probably part of why the 4 of us got folded together so easily. Same neighborhood, same kids' events, same type of marriage, same kind of social schedule. She became one of those women who slides into your life without ever officially being declared a best friend, but somehow ends up in your kitchen every week anyway. We drank wine on my patio while the kids chalked the driveway. We texted about teacher gifts and Halloween costumes and whether the Harris Teeter sushi was actually decent or just looked decent when you were too tired to cook. She borrowed my white blazer one night for some charity thing. I borrowed her curling wand before a school fundraiser. That kind of friendship. There were tiny things, maybe, if I'm being brutally honest. Brooke laughed a little too hard at Grant's jokes. Grant was always weirdly helpful when she needed something carried or hung or fixed. But suburban marriages run on a lot of casual overlap. People grill in each other's backyards. People pick up each other's kids. People help build each other's IKEA desk because nobody wants to do it alone. I never thought every interaction between them meant something. If anything, I thought Brooke sometimes flirted with everybody. Not in a homewrecker way. In a polished, attention-loving way. She touched your arm when she talked. She leaned in. She had that habit of making people feel like the room got warmer when she looked at them. Some women are just like that. And Grant, for his part, had always liked being liked. That was one of the things I used to love about him. He could walk into a room full of people and be on a first-name basis with half of them by dessert. He made conversation with valets, bartenders, random dads at soccer. He remembered people's job changes and vacations and mother-in-law surgeries. He was socially effortless in a way I have never been. That kind of charm looks very different after the fact. The camera became an issue in May. Lucy had a dance recital that month. The little 6-year-old kind where nobody is really dancing so much as enthusiastically moving in the general direction of music. She was in a sparkly pale blue costume and had lip gloss on because she thought it made her look stage ready. Grant had taken the camera because he said phone video always looked terrible under auditorium lighting and he wanted to record it properly. I remember that whole day in gross detail now. Me safety pinning Lucy's costume in the parking lot. Grant crouched near the aisle fiddling with settings. Brooke texting our group chat asking if we wanted to come over after because Tyler was making burgers. Normal stuff. The kind of normal that makes later betrayal feel even more insulting. That night, after we got home from Brooke and Tyler's place, Grant came into the kitchen holding the camera and said, "I think this thing finally died." I was unloading Tupperware from the recital snack bag and barely looked up. "What do you mean died? It won't turn on. Did the battery die?" "No, I charged it." He said it in that mildly annoyed tone that makes you instantly feel defensive. Even if you haven't actually said anything offensive yet. I wiped my hands and took it from him. It really didn't turn on. I pressed the button a few times. Nothing. He shrugged and said, "I think Lucy knocked it off the bench in the dressing room." It wasn't a huge drop, but still. Lucy was in the living room still wide awake and humming to herself, and I immediately said, "She did not. I was with her." He said, "Okay, maybe not then. Maybe it happened in the trunk. I don't know. Something happened to it." I asked if the footage from the recital was still on the card. He said, "Probably, if the card didn't get messed up." Then he took the camera back from me like it irritated him to even keep talking about it. "I'll deal with it this week." He did not deal with it that week. or the week after. Anytime I asked, he said some version of, I've been slammed, or it's probably cheaper to replace at this point, or I'm telling you, it's dead. He acted weirdly impatient about the whole thing, which was out of proportion to the problem. It wasn't like I was nagging about a luxury handbag. It was our family camera. It had Lucis recital footage, Mother's Day brunch pictures, Easter at my parents' house, and a bunch of random spring stuff on it I hadn't backed up yet. I finally said one Sunday morning in June, "Can you at least take the SD card out so I can see what's on there?" He was making coffee. He didn't turn around. Why? Because I want the pictures. If the camera is fried, the card could be corrupted. That's not how that works. He gave me this look over his shoulder, half amused and half irritated. Okay, Geek Squad, then take it to a shop if you care that much. That was the first real spark in my head that something was off. Not a fair off, just off. Because Grant was the person who usually took care of practical stuff before I even got to it. If the dryer made a noise, he already had a guy. If the fence latch broke, he fixed it before I remembered to mention it. The camera was sentimental to him too, or at least I thought it was, so his total lack of interest felt wrong. I let another week go by because life does that. My mom had a follow-up appointment. Lucy had swim lessons. I had 2 installs in Chapel Hill and one client who changed her mind about kitchen tile 3 separate times. Summer was arriving in that heavy sticky way it does here, where everything smells like wet grass and sunscreen. Then Grant mentioned that his company dinner was moving to the same night as Lucy's end of school program, and I remember thinking, fine, whatever, I'll take the camera in myself. There's a camera repair place in Raleigh called Bell and Finch. It's in an older shopping center wedged between a dry cleaner and a place that frames watercolor dog portraits. It smells like cardboard and metal and the inside of a computer. Grant had gone there once years ago for a lens cleaning, so I knew they were good. I told him I was taking it in on Saturday. He actually looked up from his phone and said, "Why?" I laughed a little because I thought he was joking. Because I want it fixed. It's not worth fixing. How do you know if nobody's looked at it? He shrugged. I'm just saying. Don't let them talk you into spending $500 on an old camera. It's not old. He did that thing where he lifted both hands like I was being difficult and he was done. Fine, take it in. Then, 5 minutes later, he said he'd come with me because he needed to swing by Nordstrom Rack after and look for golf shorts. If I had been smarter, that alone would have set off alarms. We dropped Lucy at a birthday party in Apex and drove to Bell and Finch. Grant was in an oddly good mood in the car. Too relaxed, if that makes sense. He made a whole speech about how if the camera was dead, maybe this was a sign we should just upgrade, and maybe before our beach trip we could get something lighter and more modern. He was talking too much. That's another thing that only makes sense in hindsight. People over-explain when they're trying to control where the conversation goes. The shop was quiet when we walked in. A college-age guy was behind the counter helping an older man with film canisters. And farther back there was a second employee, maybe late 50s or early 60s. With silver hair tied in a low ponytail and little rectangular glasses. He had one of those calm faces that makes you trust him immediately. That was Miguel. The younger guy took our name and put the camera on the counter. Grant started talking first, fast, like he wanted to manage the story. It took a tumble, won't power on, probably toast. But if there's any way to get the card out and save what's on it, that's all she really wants. All she really wants. I remember hearing that and feeling annoyed in a petty, stupid way. Like I was being reduced to some sentimental wife with baby photos. Miguel came over and asked if he could take a look. He turned the camera over in his hands for maybe 15 seconds, opened the side compartment, checked the battery, and then asked, "Do you mind if I grab one of ours?" Grant said, "Sure, but I'm telling you, it's dead." Miguel didn't answer. He slipped in a shop battery, pressed the power button, and the camera turned on. Just like that, my whole body went still. Grant laughed immediately, a little too loud. "Well, guess I'm an idiot." Miguel gave him a neutral look and started clicking through menus. Battery latch is loose. That can keep contact from holding consistently. Easy repair. I said, "So the photos are okay? Let me check the card." He paused then, not long, just enough that I saw it. His eyes flicked from the screen to me and then to Grant. Grant was already fishing his phone out of his pocket. "I need to take this," he said, glancing at the screen. "Be right outside." He walked out before I could answer. The second the glass door shut behind him, Miguel turned the little display slightly toward himself and lowered his voice. "Do you use this camera much?" I said, "Not as much as we used to." "Why?" He glanced toward the front window, then back at me. "I'm going to note the latch repair and card recovery options on the ticket. When you get home, copy everything on this card before you do anything else." I just stared at him. "Okay." He leaned in a little, barely. "And don't delete anything, even if it looks deleted already." I think I actually said, "What?" His face stayed careful, professional. "The camera isn't broken, ma'am. The card was recently quick formatted. That doesn't always wipe everything. If there's something on there you need, preserve it first." I felt this strange little drop in my stomach. Not a full panic, more like the exact instant an elevator shifts before it starts going down. I said, "Was it accidental?" Miguel gave the tiniest shrug. "I can't tell you why it was formatted. I'm just telling you not to erase or reuse the card until you back it up. Better yet, bring it in and I can help you image it properly." Then the door opened and Grant came back in, cheerful again, phone still in hand. "Sorry, Tyler needed to know if I'm playing next Friday." Miguel's expression changed immediately back to regular customer service blankness. He wrote something on the ticket, slid it toward me, and said, "Simple latch fix. Card appears accessible. If you want full recovery services, we can do that too." Grant paid for the latch repair and laughed the whole thing off in the car. So it was the battery door. Great. See, this is why I said maybe we should just upgrade anyway. Things falling apart. I said. Miguel said the card had been formatted. Grant kept his eyes on the road. Probably from when it glitched. He said quick formatted. "Okay, did you format it?" He gave me the kind of smile that exists only to make the other person feel silly. "Emily, I barely know how to use half the settings on that thing." "Why would I format it?" I said I didn't know. He said, "Exactly." Then he reached over and squeezed my knee like I was a child spinning myself up over nothing. "Let's pick up Lucy, go home, and not let the camera become the main character of the weekend." That line made me laugh at the time. I wish it hadn't. All afternoon I told myself I was overreacting. There were a dozen harmless explanations. Maybe he had hit something by accident. Maybe Lucy had messed with the menu. Maybe Miguel was just one of those guys who thinks every lost file is the end of the world. Still, after Lucy went to bed that night and Grant went upstairs to shower, I took the card out and sat at the kitchen island with my laptop. I used some recovery software Miguel had scribbled on the back of the receipt. Not fancy, just enough to scan for deleted files. It started pulling thumbnails within minutes. At first it was exactly what I expected. Recital footage, Lucy in her costume grinning with one front tooth missing. A bunch of blurry shots from Brooke and Tyler's deck where all four kids were holding popsicles. Poppy asleep under the breakfast table. Me making a face because Grant was filming while I was carrying 3 bowls and yelling, "If one of you lets the dog outside before I latch the gate, I swear to God." Normal life. Then the recovered files kept going. I found videos with dates I didn't recognize because they hadn't appeared in the current folder. Structure. They were in the deleted section. Short clips. Random lengths. 39 seconds, 1 minute 14, 2 minutes, 48 seconds. Most had generic file names. No previews until I opened them. The first one that mattered was just our kitchen. That's all. Our kitchen island, the pendant lights, the back hallway, half of the pantry door. It looked like the camera had been set down on the counter angled slightly wrong. The shot was empty for maybe 8 seconds, and I almost closed it. Then I heard Brooke laughing. She walked into frame from the mudroom side carrying a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. She was wearing jeans and one of my favorite white serving bowls was in her other hand. Which made me think at first maybe it was from one of our neighborhood nights. Then Grant came in behind her, put both hands on her waist, and kissed her. Not a weird friendly almost kiss. Not a drunk mistake. A familiar kiss. The kind that starts before the other person has even fully turned around because both people know exactly where it's going. I froze. I did not gasp or burst into tears or knock my chair over. I just stopped moving, completely, like my whole body was waiting for my brain to catch up before it decided what reaction we were having. Brooke laughed into the kiss and said, "You're insane. The camera's right there." And Grant said, very clearly, "Relax. She thinks it's broken." I watched that clip 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it the first time. Because there is a specific kind of disbelief that makes you keep replaying something as if one More viewing might reveal a joke, a misunderstanding, a body double, a miracle. It did not. The second clip was worse. Same kitchen, different day. Brooke was in one of my bar stools in a navy tank top I had seen her wear to one of Lucy's school things. Grant was pouring her a glass of wine. You could hear the dishwasher running. Brooke said, "I hate sneaking through the garage. Your nosy retired neighbor definitely notices my car." Grant laughed. "Then stop driving the Tesla over here in broad daylight." She said, "Not all of us can roll up in a medical sales guy camouflage vehicle." He laughed again. It was the relaxed sound of a man in a space he considered safe. Then Brooke asked, "Did she buy the broken camera thing?" And Grant said, "Em believed Lucy dropped it. Easier that way." I think that was the moment I got truly angry. Not the kiss. Not even Brooke in my kitchen. Lucy. He had let me think our daughter might have broken something sentimental and expensive because it was convenient for him. He had wrapped his lie around her by name. I kept going. That was the sickest part. Once you start, you cannot stop. Because your brain suddenly believes the worst is already true and now it just wants the whole shape of it. There were 11 deleted clips total that mattered. Some were almost nothing. Their hands reaching for each other. Brooke fixing her ponytail in my microwave reflection while Grant kissed her shoulder. One of them whispering because one of the kids was upstairs. That detail almost made me throw up. The longest clip was the one that destroyed whatever little part of me still wanted to believe this was just some impulsive thing that got out of hand. Brooke was leaning against my counter eating tortilla chips straight from a bowl. Grant had the fridge open. It looked like the aftermath of some casual afternoon. Sun through the windows, my life arranged around them. Brooke said, "You need to tell her before someone else does." Grant said, "I will. You said that in March." I said after bonus season. "You also said after the beach trip." He shut the fridge and turned around. "I'm not splitting everything before my payout clears. I'm not an idiot." Brooke rolled her eyes. "That sounds so romantic when you say it like that." He smiled at her. "You want romantic or you want smart?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I want this to stop feeling like a high school affair." Grant took a sip from a beer bottle and said, "Then stop panicking. Em is overwhelmed with her mom and Lucy and a million house projects. She doesn't see anything." That sentence was like being slapped. Not because it was inaccurate that I was overwhelmed. I was. But hearing your husband describe your actual life load as the blind spot he's using to cheat on you does something to your nervous system. It makes you feel stupid and exposed at the same time. Then Brooke said, "Tyler keeps asking why I'm so checked out." And Grant said, "So tell him you're stressed." She laughed. That line works better on wives than husbands. Then, after a second, she said, "You promise you're not going to make me the villain when this blows up?" Grant actually smiled. "Babe, she already trusts you more than half her own friends." I shut my laptop so hard it startled the dog. Poppy lifted her head from the rug, looked at me, and then laid it back down. I remember that detail because it felt so obscene that the room could stay ordinary. Upstairs, the shower turned off. Grant was in my house, clean and warm and probably about to come downstairs and ask if I wanted tea. While evidence of him calling me overwhelmed and useful was still open on my laptop. I did the only sensible thing I've maybe ever done under stress. I didn't confront him. I copied everything. Every file, every recovered clip, the existing photos, the metadata, all of it. I copied it to my laptop, to an external hard drive from my desk drawer, and to a cloud folder with a password Grant wouldn't know. Then I put the SD card back in the camera, zipped the bag closed, and sat there breathing through my nose until my face looked normal. When Grant came downstairs, he was towel drying his hair and wearing gray lounge shorts. He looked annoyingly handsome. Still, that's another cruel thing about betrayal. People do not become visually villainous in the moment you need them to. He glanced at my laptop and said, "Any luck?" I said, "Some stuff recovered." "Good." That was it. Not what stuff. Not do you want me to help? Just good. He went to the fridge, got a Topo Chico, and stood at the island where he had kissed Brooke in the footage I had just watched. He asked if I wanted to keep our dinner reservation with Tyler and Brooke next weekend or reschedule because of his travel schedule. I actually said, "Let's see how the week goes." Then I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, turned on the vent fan, and cried so hard I had to press a washcloth over my mouth so Lucy wouldn't hear me through the wall. The next morning I called Miguel. Not the shop. Miguel directly, because he had written his name on the receipt. I told him I had copied the files and asked if there was any way to preserve them properly. With dates intact. There was a pause, and then he said, very gently, "You found what you needed." I said yes. He told me to come in alone if I wanted. And he'd help me create a proper image of the card and print a service note about the device. Condition: he did not ask questions. He did not act curious. He just sounded like a man who had lived long enough to know exactly when not to make somebody say a painful thing out loud. I went Monday afternoon while Grant thought I was meeting a tile vendor. Miguel sat with me at a back workstation and walked me through copying the card in a way that would preserve timestamps. He printed a repair summary that said the camera was functional after a latch adjustment, and that the memory card contained recoverable data consistent with a quick format. Rather than hardware destruction, he did not editorialize. He didn't need to. At one point he handed me a bottle of water and said, "Whatever you do next, don't let on until your important documents are somewhere safe." That was the moment I realized I was not just dealing with an affair. I was dealing with a man who had been planning his timing. So I started looking. I pulled bank statements first. Grant handled most of our long-term investing stuff because he enjoyed it and I didn't. I knew our checking, our mortgage, our kids' savings, all the normal things. What I didn't know was how much he had quietly started moving around in the last 5 months. Nothing cartoonishly evil. He wasn't stuffing cash in vents like a cable drama husband. But there were hotel charges in Raleigh on nights he said he had late client dinners. Restaurant tabs at places I know damn well he never took me. A furniture store charge in downtown Raleigh that I later learned was for bar stools. And one transfer into a separate brokerage account that was only in his name. Funded partly from a joint bonus deposit. I also found an email confirmation. Because Grant is sloppy in the exact way men who think they are smart often are. He had forwarded something to our printer and forgotten it auto-synced to the family iPad. It was for a short-term furnished apartment lease starting August 1st. This was in late June. He had a place lined up before he had apparently decided to tell me anything. That night I slept maybe 2 hours. The next day I called my cousin Rachel in Chapel Hill. She's 42 and does family law. We are not incredibly close emotionally. But she is one of those women who can move from small talk to competent fury in half a second when needed. I told her I needed a referral and that it was urgent. I did not tell her details until I was in her office the following afternoon with the drive in my purse. Rachel watched one clip with her mouth set like stone and then stopped it. She said, "Okay, first, stop saying sorry. Second, do not confront him yet. Third, I'm getting Dana involved." Dana was another attorney in her firm, a little younger, razor sharp. The kind of woman who wears navy sheath dresses and could probably dismantle a human being using only calendar invites and polite diction. She asked me practical questions for an hour while I tried not to float away from my own body. Do I know about all accounts? Is there any history of addiction, violence, or mental health concerns either of us might weaponize? Has he ever threatened custody? Do I have access to the home title, insurance, tax returns, retirement statements? Does he know I've seen the files? That was the worst part. Answering, no, but he talked on video about timing this after bonus season and not splitting things before payout. Dana actually closed her eyes for a second and said, "Well, that's helpful of him. Because we're in North Carolina, the affair itself mattered more than it would in some other states. Or at least enough to be strategically useful." Dana didn't promise revenge fantasy outcomes, which I appreciated. She just said the footage was powerful, the financial timing was ugly. And my best move was to stay calm, gather records, and let him keep underestimating me for a little longer. So that became my whole personality for 10 days. Calm. I made Lucis camp lunches. I answered client emails. I sat next to Grant at a Thursday night neighborhood cookout while Brooke complimented the pasta salad I had made. At one point she touched my elbow and said, "You look tired. Is your mom stuff flaring back up?" I looked straight at her and said, "A little." She squeezed my arm and said, "I'm here if you need anything." That sentence almost made me black out. Tyler was there too, by the grill, laughing with Grant about golf. He had no idea. Their boys were drawing with sidewalk chalk while my husband and his wife were carrying on an affair in broad daylight and then eating hamburgers with all of us like cast members in some sick streaming miniseries. I kept my face together. Somehow. At night, after Grant fell asleep, I gathered documents. Mortgage papers, tax returns, insurance info, copies of his retirement accounts, screenshots of transfers, even our family calendar because I wanted to document the exact days certain clips were recorded. One of the videos had been taken the afternoon I was with my mother at her surgical consult. Another was from the morning of Lucy's dentist appointment. When Grant had told me he had an early regional call, the level of overlap made me feel physically contaminated. I also realized they had used my house while Lucy was home at least twice. Nothing explicit happened on camera in front of her, thank God. But there was one clip where Brooke said, "Is she still upstairs with Bluey?" And Grant answered, "Yeah, we've got 20 minutes. I still feel sick when I think about that. The hardest decision was Tyler. Dana said I did not owe him immediate disclosure if it would compromise my legal planning. But she also understood why I wanted to tell him before the confrontation stage. Especially because once things blew up, Brooke might spin first. I met Tyler at a coffee shop in Morrisville on a Wednesday morning while both our kids were at camp. He smiled when he saw me and said, "Is this about the fundraiser committee? Because if Brooke volunteered me for one more spreadsheet." Then he stopped because of my face. Tyler is one of those broad, solid, decent men who always looks a little like he's on the way to Home Depot even when he's in business casual. He sat down slowly and said, "What happened?" I did not warm up to it. I slid my phone across the table with one of the clips loaded and said, "I'm sorry to do it this way, but you need to see this." He watched maybe 10 seconds. Then he handed the phone back like it had burned him. He went pale in this very specific way I will never forget. Not dramatic, not shaking, just the blood gone. He said, "How long?" I said, "At least since March based on what I found." He stared out the window for a while. Then he asked if there was more. I said yes. He watched 2 more clips with his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. The worst one for him was not the kissing. It was Brooke saying, "Tyler keeps asking why I'm so checked out," and Grant laughing. Tyler whispered, "Jesus Christ." Then he asked me if I had confronted Grant. I said no. He nodded slowly and said, "Neither have I obviously." We sat there in silence for a long minute. Then he said, "She told me you'd been leaning on her a lot because of your mom. She said you were in a fragile place." That word, fragile, it was the same move Grant had made in the kitchen clip. Repackage my actual life stress as a personality weakness. Something inconvenient. Something that explained why I didn't see anything. I told Tyler I was working with a lawyer. His eyebrows went up a little, like he respected that. He said he wanted names. I gave him Rachel's firm. Before we left, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Emily," not in the polite way. "I'm really sorry." I said, "Me too." Then he did something unexpectedly kind. He said, "For what it's worth, I never thought you were fragile." I went back to my car and cried for 10 solid minutes. By then Dana had helped me build a plan. Nothing cinematic. Real life is mostly paperwork and timing. Open a separate account, move only what was appropriate and documented. Secure my personal inheritance funds, which were not his. Get copies of Lucy's medical and school records. Decide whether I wanted to stay in the house initially or have him leave. Choose a confrontation date that did not leave me alone with him overnight if I didn't want that. We picked a Friday. Grant thought he was leaving that afternoon for an overnight golf thing near Pinehurst with coworkers. In reality, he had told me that and also told Brooke. In one of the recovered messages Tyler later confirmed that they'd have room to breathe by the weekend. Tyler arranged for his sister to take the twins Friday after camp. Rachel had the draft filing ready. I asked my younger sister Hannah to come stay with me. Because things with Grant were bad, but I still didn't tell her details until she arrived. She drove in from Asheville with 2 overnight bags and one look at my face and said, "Who am I killing?" I loved her so much in that moment. The confrontation itself happened at my kitchen island at 2:40 on a Friday afternoon, with my repaired camera sitting between us. Grant came downstairs in khakis and a polo, carrying his duffel, and said, "You okay? You look weird." I said, "Sit down." He actually smiled a little. "That sounds ominous." I said it again, "Sit down." Something in my tone must have landed because he set the duffel down and sat. Hannah was upstairs with Lucy doing an art project, door closed, white noise app on. I had told Lucy Aunt Hannah was visiting early because we were having grown-up talks. She was happy. Kids always are until the room changes temperature. Grant looked at the camera and said, "What's with the museum piece?" I slid the phone toward him first. Not the camera, the clip. He looked down, saw himself and Brooke in our kitchen, and every bit of color left his face. He didn't speak, he didn't grab the phone. He just stared. I let the clip play through the part where Brooke said, "She thinks it's broken." Then I paused it. The silence was so complete I could hear the refrigerator hum. Finally he said, very quietly, "Emily." Not "I'm sorry," not explanation, just my name, like it was the beginning of a negotiation. I said, "The camera wasn't broken." He swallowed hard. "I can explain. You can try." Then all at once he started talking. Not well, fast, contradictory. He said it wasn't supposed to happen. He said things had been bad between us for months. He said he had been trying to tell me. He said Brooke was unhappy too. He said he had panicked about the footage and formatted the card because he didn't know what else to do. He said he never meant for me to find out like this. I remember staring at him and thinking how amazing it is that some people can pile lie on top of lie and still sound almost offended by their own discomfort. I said, "You were timing a split around your bonus." He closed his mouth. I said, "You had an apartment lined up." He closed it harder. I said, "You let me think Lucy broke the camera." He looked up then, like that was the one detail that genuinely landed. "I didn't mean." "No, don't do that, don't say what you didn't mean. You looked me in the face while I thought our little girl might have ruined something sentimental. Because it was useful to you." He started crying. I wish I could say that moved me. It didn't, not at that point. Maybe because it felt too late. Or maybe because I had spent 2 weeks watching him laugh in recovered clips while discussing the timetable for dismantling our marriage. He said, "I was going to tell you after the summer." I actually laughed. Just once. A sharp, ugly sound. After the summer. After bonus season. After the beach trip. After you got your payout. After you had a furnished apartment. After Brooke stopped feeling like your mistress and started feeling like your future. He put both hands over his face and said, "Please keep your voice down." That made something icy settle in me. I said, very calmly, "Tyler already knows." His hands dropped immediately. "What?" I said, "He knows. Brooke knows that he knows. And I've spoken to an attorney." That was the moment he stopped being a guilty husband and became what he really was underneath all the charm. A man doing fast mental math. What attorney? I just looked at him. He said, "Emily, please don't do something rash." Rash. After months of deception in my house. I said, "Rash was sleeping with my friend in the room next to where our daughter watched cartoons." He flinched. Good. He started trying a different angle then. More controlled. He said he wanted this to be civil. He said we owed Lucy peace. He said he knew he had handled things terribly but that we did not need to blow up 2 families out of pain. That line was almost impressive. The way he positioned exposure as my destructive choice rather than the consequence of his actions. I told him he needed to pack a real bag, not a fake golf bag, and leave by 6. He asked if I was kicking him out of his own house. I said I was asking him to avoid turning a private legal matter into a scene in front of our daughter, which was me being a lot kinder than he had been to me. He said, "So that's it?" I looked at him and said, "No. That was it when the repair technician cared more about protecting me than my own husband did." That shut him up. He left at 5:12. Not dramatically, no shouting, no broken dishes. He packed a suitcase, came downstairs twice because he kept forgetting chargers and shaving stuff, and asked if he could hug Lucy goodbye before dinner. I said yes, because this was between him and me, not him and her, at least not in that moment. Watching him crouch in the doorway of her bedroom while she showed him a drawing of a dolphin nearly broke me in a completely different way. There are no clean villains in family collapse. There are just people who do unforgivable things and then still tie tiny shoes and cut strawberries in half and remember the dentist appointment time. That's part of why it's so disorienting. When he left, Hannah locked the front door behind him and said, "I know this isn't funny, but that man really thought he was clever with a camera." Then I laughed so hard I cried. Tyler texted me around 7 that night. 3 words. She confessed everything. I didn't answer right away. I was sitting on Lucy's bed waiting for her to fall asleep. She kept asking why Daddy had to go on a trip without telling her first. I said he had some grown-up things to work out and loved her very much. Which was true and not enough. After she was asleep, I went downstairs and finally texted Tyler back, "I'm sorry." He replied, "Me too." The next few weeks were ugly in the boring way real breakups are ugly. Lawyers, schedules, Excel sheets, Grant wanting to talk, off the record, and me refusing. Brooke sending one long message that began, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from." Which I deleted after the first line because she was correct and I saw no reason to reward self-awareness with access. My mother-in-law called me crying and said, "He says he made a terrible mistake." I told her I had video of several terrible decisions, not one mistake, and she went quiet. A few neighborhood people found out quickly, of course. Affairs in suburbs spread like smoke through HVAC. Nobody ever admits to gossiping, but suddenly people stop making eye contact at soccer. One mom who had barely spoken to me in 3 years brought over banana bread and said, "If you need me to pick up Lucy after camp, just text." Another sent a paragraph about holding space. Brooke stopped coming to anything for a while. Tyler moved into the guest room before eventually renting his own townhouse. Grant tried to pivot into remorseful honesty once he realized I wasn't going to protect him from consequences. He sent long texts about shame and therapy and how badly he had compartmentalized. He cried in mediation. He said more than once that he didn't know what had happened to him. I never found that line convincing. I know exactly what happened to him. He liked being admired. He liked being comfortable. He liked having options and timing and control. And because nobody stopped him early, he kept going until a camera caught what his conscience apparently didn't. The most surreal part came about a month later when I was cleaning out the hall closet and found the padded black camera bag shoved behind beach towels. Inside it was the service receipt from Bell and Finch. Grant had kept it, and on the back, in Miguel's neat handwriting, was the recovery software recommendation in a little note I had been too numb to really absorb. That first day, preserve before confronting. That man had seen my husband for maybe 12 minutes and understood the situation better than I did. After 10 years of marriage, I actually drove back to Bell and Finch just to thank him. He recognized me immediately, which I'm sure means my face that day was not exactly forgettable. I told him I just wanted to say he had probably saved me from walking into a much worse situation. Blind. He nodded once and said, "I'm glad you listened." I asked him, because by then I genuinely wanted to know, what made him say something. He shrugged and said, "The camera wasn't broken. Your husband wanted it to sound broken. There's usually a reason for that." Then he went back to adjusting a lens at the workbench like it was the most ordinary conversation in the world. Maybe for him, it was. Grant lives in Raleigh now in an apartment with gray walls and one of those resort-style pools that developers think can make up for bad life choices. We share custody of Lucy, which is as hard as I imagined and also harder in ways I did not. She still runs to him at pickup. She still asks if I remember the beach trip where Daddy buried her legs in the sand like a mermaid. Tail. I do. I remember everything now. That's part of the problem. Brooke moved out too. Tyler and I are not friends exactly. But we have this strange quiet alliance that only exists because two people handed us the same humiliation and assumed we wouldn't compare notes. Sometimes I still take the camera out. It works perfectly now. There are newer photos on it. Lucy at the pumpkin patch last fall. My mom, healthy and grinning, holding a giant bowl of pasta at Thanksgiving. Hannah asleep on my couch with Poppy curled against her legs. Normal life, again, or some new version of it. I never deleted the old files. Not because I sit around watching them. I don't. I can barely stand even knowing they exist. But I kept them because for one awful stretch of time, those files were the only version of the truth that wasn't being managed for me by someone else. And every now and then, when somebody says something lazy like, "Did you have any idea?" I think about Grant standing in that shop acting casual, talking about upgrading to a newer model. Already convinced he had handled the problem. Then I think about Miguel leaning in and saying, very quietly, "Don't delete anything." And I still get chills. Story number 3. I thought my husband forgot our anniversary, then a receipt revealed he had celebrated it somewhere else. My husband forgot our anniversary until I found the receipt that said he had already celebrated it. I honestly do not know if I am overreacting or if my marriage ended 2 days ago and I am just the last person to realize it. My husband and I have been married for 9 years. Together for almost 13. We are not one of those couples who post giant anniversary tributes online or renew vows every other summer or act like every date night is some cinematic event. We are pretty ordinary. We both work full-time. We have a house that constantly needs something fixed. We fight about whose turn it is to buy dog food. And by the end of most weekdays we are both tired enough to think ordering takeout counts as emotional intimacy. I am saying that because I do not want people picturing some glossy fake Marriage where I ignored 10 obvious red flags because I was living in a fantasy. I thought we had a normal marriage. Not perfect, not effortless, but stable and real. My name is Natalie. My husband is Grant. He is 40, I am 38. And if anyone had asked me last week to describe him in one sentence, I would have said he is the kind of man who forgets where he left his keys but never forgets anything important. Birthdays, due dates, conversations from 6 months ago, the exact color I wore on our third date. The way I take my coffee when I am stressed even though I do not realize I have changed my usual order. He has always been that way. Not flashy romantic, but attentive, solid, deliberate. That is why what happened hit me the way it did. Our anniversary is July 17th. It has been July 17th every year that we have been married, obviously. But also every year we have been together because we got married on the anniversary of our first date. We started doing that because Grant once told me he did not trust himself to remember two different relationship milestones and wanted to make life easier on himself. It became a joke between us. He set the wedding date so he would never have an excuse. He used to say, "I built my own trap here, Nat, I know that." It was one of those stupid lines couples repeat for years. So when this July started, I was not even thinking about whether he would remember. I was thinking about what I should wear to dinner. We had talked vaguely about doing something low-key because both of us had a rough June. My mom had some health issues that turned out to be manageable but still scary. And Grant had been buried at work. He works in commercial insurance, the least sexy job on earth. But his office had been going through some kind of regional shake-up after a merger and he was working later than usual. I work in HR for a hospital network. So my own job is basically just dealing with other people's panic for 8 hours and then driving home in silence. We are not exactly living glamorous lives. We both kept saying we would just do dinner somewhere nice and maybe take a weekend trip in August. Instead, the week of our anniversary, though, Grant was weird. Not suspicious weird, just distracted. He was on his phone more. He took 2 calls in the garage with the door half shut. He came home late Tuesday and Thursday. When I asked if everything was okay, he said work was a mess and his boss, Kevin, kept changing direction on a client renewal package. I remember that because he was irritated enough to say, "If Kevin says, pivot, one more time I am going to launch myself into traffic." That sounded like normal work stress. I believed him. On the actual day, I woke up earlier than he did. I showered, dried my hair, and came downstairs expecting maybe flowers on the counter or a card propped against the coffee maker because that is the level of anniversary husband Grant usually operates on. Nothing. Not even a weird smile like he was hiding a surprise for later. He came into the kitchen in his work clothes, kissed me on the cheek, poured coffee, and asked if I had seen his blue tie. I waited maybe 30 seconds, smiling like an idiot, expecting the follow-up. It did not come. Then he said, "Do you want me to pick up dry cleaning on the way home?" That was the moment a little cold feeling started in my stomach. I said, "Sure," and waited again, because sometimes he likes to drag things out for a joke. Still nothing. Then I said, trying to sound light, "Anything else happening today?" He looked at me like he was running through a mental calendar. I watched it happen. It was so obvious it made me feel stupid. He glanced toward the refrigerator where our monthly calendar hangs, then back at me, and said, "I have that conference call at 11 and then probably late meetings." I cannot fully explain the feeling of realizing in real time that someone you love has forgotten something you thought mattered to both of you. It sounds childish when I type it out because obviously people forget dates. Life gets hectic. Nobody died. Nobody cheated, as far as I knew then. It was just an anniversary. But it was not just the date. It was what it represented. We had built years of little traditions around it. Pancakes in the morning if it fell on a weekend. Leaving each other cards. A dumb selfie every year in the same spot by the living room window because the light is good there. In the evening, it was one of those marriage rituals that starts off small and then becomes part of your idea of who you are together. So when he stood there half awake asking about dry cleaning, it felt like I was the only one still inside our life. I told myself not to be dramatic. He was stressed. Maybe he had something planned later and was acting casual. Maybe he was doing that thing men in sitcoms do where they pretend to forget and then produce some huge surprise. I did not actually think Grant would pull off a grand reveal because he is many things but not a theatrical mastermind, but I still spent an embarrassing amount of that morning bargaining with myself. Around noon, I texted him, "Hope your day is getting better." He sent back, "Barely. Total disaster here. No heart emoji. No anniversary mention. Nothing." At 2, my younger sister Lauren texted me, "Happy anniversary, lovebirds. Dinner plans?" I stared at the message for a full minute because it suddenly felt humiliating that my sister remembered and my husband did not. I lied and said, "He's working late but we'll celebrate this weekend." She sent a sad face and said, "Men are trash, but I hope he makes it up to you." I laughed at the time, but that line came back to me later in a much uglier way. Grant got home after 8 carrying the dry cleaning and looking exhausted. He set the hangers over a chair, bent down to pet our dog, Cooper, and started talking about some client issue before he was even fully inside. I just stood there at the kitchen counter listening until he finally stopped mid-sentence because he realized I was not reacting normally. He said, "What?" I said, "Really?" He looked confused for maybe 2 seconds, and then I saw it. That horrible flash of recognition. His whole face changed. He closed his eyes, swore under his breath, and sat down at the table like someone had hit his off switch. "Natalie," he said. Oh my God. I did not yell. I almost wish I had. Because yelling would have been cleaner than the kind of hurt that came out instead. I said, "You forgot." He immediately started apologizing. Not defensive, not dismissive. Just mortified. He said he had been overwhelmed, he had not slept right all week, his schedule got scrambled. He was sorry, he knew it was awful, he hated himself for it, he would make it right. He stood up and tried to hug me and I stepped back. That seemed to shake him more than anything. We are not a couple that does dramatic physical rejection. If one of us reaches for the other person usually responds. That is just how we are. So when I stepped back, he looked genuinely scared. He offered to order from my favorite Italian place. He asked if I wanted to go out right then even though it was late. He said he could make reservations somewhere for the weekend. He said we could take Monday off and drive to the coast. It all sounded desperate and last minute and wrong. I told him I was not interested in a panic anniversary assembled after the fact like a damaged piece of furniture. I said I was tired and went upstairs. He slept in the guest room that night, not because I told him to, but because after I got into bed he came to the doorway, looked at me for a second, and quietly said, "I think maybe I should give you space." I did not answer. I just turned off my lamp. The next morning he had left flowers on the kitchen island with a card. The flowers were white roses and blue hydrangeas, which would have been beautiful if they had not felt like evidence. The card was sweet. Too sweet, maybe. It was handwritten and specific and full of memories. All the kinds of things you say when you know you have messed up and want to prove you still know the person you hurt. He wrote about our first apartment and our trip to Savannah and the time our dishwasher flooded the kitchen on Christmas Eve and we ended up eating takeout on towels while laughing hysterically. Reading it should have softened me. Instead it made me angry because clearly he had not forgotten me. He had forgotten the date, not the marriage. And somehow that was almost worse because it meant he had let all the meaning collapse under the weight of whatever else mattered more. I took the flowers to work because leaving them at home felt like participating in my own manipulation. My friend Dana from payroll saw them and asked how the anniversary went. I said, "He forgot," and she made the exact face you would expect a divorced woman in her mid-40s to make when hearing about a husband problem. Dana does not overreact about anything. She has 2 teenagers, an ex-husband who moved to Arizona with a Pilates instructor, and the emotional weariness of someone who has paid for braces twice. If Dana thinks a man has screwed up, he has screwed up. She said, "Did he forget because he's stupid or forget because he's guilty?" I laughed because I thought it was a joke. She did not laugh back. "Nat," she said, "I am not trying to be that person. But men who cheat love to overcompensate after they get sloppy." I told her Grant was not cheating. She shrugged in that way people do when they do not want to argue with your denial but also do not respect it. Then she said, "Probably not. But if your gut is bothering you, do not talk yourself out of it just because you want the easy explanation." I wish I could say I ignored her. I did not. Her words lodged in the back of my mind and stayed there all day. That evening Grant came home early with takeout from the Thai place we both love. He apologized again. He said he had already blocked out the coming Saturday and wanted to take me to dinner at Bellamy's, the steakhouse where we had our rehearsal dinner, if I was willing. He was trying. I could see that. He looked awful, honestly. Like he had not stopped kicking himself since the night before. A reasonable person probably would have let him make it up to her. But I kept hearing Dana's voice. Forget because he's stupid or forget because he's guilty. So I did something I had never done in our entire relationship. I looked through his wallet. I want to be clear that I am not proud of this. I am not one of those people who thinks invading privacy is empowering. I hated myself while I did it. Grant was in the shower. His pants were draped over the chair in our room. His wallet was in the back pocket. I kept telling myself I was just going to see if there was maybe a dinner reservation card or some note or anything that would prove he had intended to celebrate and got derailed. I do not even know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe I wanted to confirm innocence so badly that I was willing to become someone I did not like in order to get it. Inside his wallet were the normal things. Driver's license, insurance card, receipts folded into the cash slot, a business card from a contractor we might hire to redo the deck, a grocery receipt, a gas receipt, and then there was a receipt from Marlowe's. Marlowe's is not just any restaurant. Marlowe's is the kind of place people go when they are performing romance for an audience of one. Low lighting, velvet booths, expensive wine list, little individual butter curls that look like they were sculpted by a jeweler. We had gone there once for our 5th anniversary because Grant got a bonus that year and wanted to do something fancy. It is not near his office. It is not near our house. It is downtown, almost 40 minutes in the opposite direction. The receipt was dated July 17th. Our anniversary. Table for 2. A bottle of Pinot Noir Grant likes but I do not. 2 entrees. Dessert. Total with tip, $243.18. I remember every detail because my brain went cold in a way I had never experienced before. Not hot anger. Not chaos. Just this flat, terrifying clarity. Like the world had suddenly arranged itself into a shape I did not recognize but could not deny. He had not forgotten our anniversary. He had spent it somewhere else. I sat on the edge of the bed holding that receipt while the shower ran in the bathroom and felt like maybe I was going to throw up or maybe I was going to pass out. I heard the water turn off and shoved everything back exactly where I found it. Then I walked downstairs because I was scared he would come out and see something on my face. I stood in the kitchen pretending to check something on my phone while my heart pounded so hard it hurt. Grant came downstairs a few minutes later in clean clothes, towel drying his hair, and asked if I wanted him to plate the food. I turned and looked at him and I swear to God the strangest thought entered my mind. It was not, who was she, or, how long has this been happening? It was, how can you look so normal? I said, how was Marlowe's? He froze. Not in a subtle way. Not confused. Not innocent. He stopped moving completely and looked at me like I had fired a gun in the kitchen. There are moments in a marriage that split time into before and after. I had always thought if I ever faced infidelity, or even the suspicion of it, there would be some argument first, some escalation, but that one question did everything at once. His silence was an answer before he ever opened his mouth. What, he said finally, but it came out weak. I said, I found the receipt in your wallet. July 17th, table for 2, Marlowe's. So I'll ask again, how was Marlowe's? He sat down very slowly at the kitchen table. He did not deny it. He did not get angry that I had looked through his wallet. He just looked tired in a way I had never seen before. Like he had been running toward a cliff and finally reached the edge. He said, it's not what you think. I know that is cliché. I know everyone says that. I almost laughed from the sheer insult of hearing something so stupid. I told him that unless I thought he spent our anniversary having a romantic dinner with another person at the exact restaurant we once celebrated our marriage in, I was not sure what else I was supposed to think. He covered his face with both hands and stayed like that for maybe 10 seconds. Then he said, I met with someone. I should have told you. I didn't know how. I asked who. He did not answer quickly enough. I asked again, louder this time, who? He said, a woman named Elise. There is no elegant way to describe what hearing another woman's name in your kitchen does to you. It enters your body like a foreign object. Elise. Just a normal pretty American name. 2 syllables. Enough to rearrange the air in the room. I said, who is Elise? He swallowed and said, my daughter. I genuinely thought for a second that he had gone insane. I said, you're what? He looked at me with this expression that was part dread, part resignation, and said, my daughter. I found out about her in June. There are so many bad possibilities your mind can leap to. And I promise you, secret adult child, was not on my list. Affair, maybe. Emotional cheating, maybe. Midlife crisis, maybe. But not that. Not some buried part of his life walking into our present like a lawsuit from the universe. I did not sit down. I could not. I stayed standing at the counter gripping the edge so hard my fingers hurt and told him to start talking immediately and not leave anything out. So he did. Before he met me, when he was in his early 20s, Grant had a serious girlfriend named Brooke. They dated for a little over a year. I knew the name vaguely because it had come up once years ago in one of those harmless conversations about exes. He had described her as his college relationship that burned out badly. That was it. What I did not know was that shortly after they broke up, Brooke moved back to Ohio. Found out she was pregnant, and never told him. According to Grant, she called him once after the breakup but he ignored it because they had ended badly and he assumed she wanted to reopen old wounds. Then life moved on. He met me 3 years later. Brooke apparently raised the child, a girl named Elise, on her own and told her very little about Grant except his name. Brooke died in May. That part hit me because it was so abrupt and tragic I almost lost the thread of my own anger. Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed late, dead within the year. Elise is 21 now. After her mother died, she found old paperwork and an address connected to Grant's parents. She reached out to Grant's older sister, Melissa, through social media trying to confirm whether he was really her father. Melissa called Grant. He thought it was some kind of scam at first, then agreed to a paternity test. The test came back in June. 99.something% probability. Elise is his daughter. By the time he finished explaining this, I felt like I was standing inside someone else's marriage. He kept talking, words spilling faster once he had started. He said he had been reeling. He had not wanted to tell me until he knew for sure. Then after the test, he wanted to tell me but Elise asked to meet him first because she did not want to be an announcement before being a person. That line is burned into my head because it was apparently meaningful enough for him to remember. Exactly, and there I was hearing it for the first time. So on our anniversary, while I was at home thinking he had forgotten me, he drove downtown and met the daughter he never knew existed. At Marlowe's, the restaurant mattered to me in a way I do not think he understood until I said it out loud. Of all places, why there? Why our place? Why that night? He said he did not think of it that way when he made the reservation. It was last minute, he wanted somewhere private and quiet, he knew the food was good. And his head was a mess. He swore it was not chosen because of the anniversary. He had not connected the date when Elise first suggested meeting that week because he had so much else spiraling in his brain. Then by the time he realized, he said it felt impossible to tell me, hey, sorry I'm emotionally detonating and also I have to miss our anniversary because my secret daughter wants to meet me, so he convinced himself he would tell me after. Then he got home, panicked, forgot how to act like a human being, and everything spiraled. I know how that sounds. I know. Even typing it now, if someone else wrote it, I would say it reads like the most creative cheating cover story on earth. And maybe that is why I did not believe him. I said, you expect me to believe you just discovered you have a grown daughter and somehow the first move you made was to hide it from your wife. He said he knew it was unforgivable. I said, not just hide it. Lie by omission. Let me sit here thinking you forgot our anniversary while you were having a secret dinner with another woman. He said, I know. I said, at our restaurant. He closed his eyes. I think that was the moment I stopped hearing his explanations as explanations and started hearing them as evidence of how easily he had kept me outside of something enormous. Whether he slept with someone or fathered someone decades ago without knowing. The result for me in that kitchen was the same. He had built a secret hallway through our life and walked down it alone. I asked for proof. He immediately got his phone, opened email, and showed me the paternity results. He showed me messages from Melissa. He showed me a text thread with Elise that started awkward and formal and got warmer over time. I saw enough to understand he was not inventing this on the spot. There were real details, real grief, real confusion, real attempts by a 21-year-old girl to figure out who her father was after losing her mother. Her texts gutted me in a way I was not prepared for. She wrote things like, no pressure if you want no contact, I just needed to ask. And, my mom said you were not a bad person, just young and gone. And, I'm not trying to ruin your life. Imagine being 21 and having to write that to a stranger who made you. So suddenly I was furious at Grant, hurt as his wife. And also heartbroken for this girl I had never met. I asked why Melissa knew before I did. He said because Melissa had to know in order to contact him and help coordinate the test. I asked if anyone else knew. He said his parents know now, Melissa knows. And Kevin knows because he had to leave work one afternoon for the test and later for the meeting. And needed a cover explanation for schedule changes. That part hit me too. His boss knew before I did. Not the details maybe, but enough. Enough to be in the circle and I was outside it. I told him to leave. He asked if I meant for the night. I said I did not care what unit of time it was, I just needed him gone. He went to his brother Aaron's house. I know because Aaron texted me later saying Grant was there and asking if I was okay. Which only made me more furious because now his entire side of the family probably knew I was. Sitting in a wrecked house trying to figure out whether I had been betrayed, lied to, or both. That night I called Lauren and told her everything. I had to say it twice because the first time she thought I meant daughter metaphorically. Like maybe a mentee or something. Once she understood, she said, "Okay, so either this is the wildest true story ever or your husband deserves an Oscar." That about sums up where my brain was too. The next morning I went to work on almost no sleep. Dana took one look at me and pulled me into an empty office. I told her the whole thing, every impossible detail. She listened with her mouth half open and then said, very calmly, "You know you still need to verify all of it." At first I got defensive because I was exhausted and did not want more suspicion piled on top of what I already had, but she was right. Even if the daughter is real, that does not make the rest of his behavior okay. It also does not mean there is nothing else. People lie around truth all the time because truth makes the lie easier to swallow. So I started verifying. I looked up Brooke online. She existed. Obituary from June. Survived by daughter Elise. The age lined up. Hometown in Ohio. There were a few old public social media posts from relatives. Grant's story checked out at least enough to make it real. Then I searched Elise. Sparse profile, mostly private, but enough to confirm she was a real person in the right age range. There was a photo of her from a college event and my stomach dropped because she had Grant's eyes. Not kind of, not maybe, she had his exact eyes. Same strange pale blue that looks almost gray in certain light. Genetics are cruel when you are looking for denial. I called Melissa at lunch because I figured if I was going to get answers, I needed them from someone besides my husband. Melissa and I have always gotten along. Not best friends, but warm. She answered on the second ring and sounded like she had been expecting me. She did not waste time pretending ignorance. She confirmed everything. She said she had wanted Grant to tell me immediately. She said she argued with him about it. She said he was panicked and kept insisting he needed to process it first and did not want to dump it on me until he understood what contact with Elise would look like. Melissa told him that was selfish. She used that exact word. Selfish. Hearing someone from his own family say it helped and hurt at the same time. I asked whether the anniversary dinner was planned around our date. She said as far as she knew, no. She said Elise was only in town for a narrow window because she had to go back to Columbus for work and classes. She said Grant was spiraling about when to meet her and finally chose that evening because it was the only time she was available before leaving. Melissa said, "None of that excuses how he handled it, Natalie. I just don't want you thinking he was on a date." Then she paused and added, "He was scared." Which is not the same as right. That sentence has been banging around in my head ever since because it is the whole problem. Fear explains so much bad behavior. It does not erase it. When I got home that evening, Grant was sitting on the porch steps. He had not used his key because I told him I needed space. He stood up when he saw me pull in and looked so cautious. Like I was a stray animal that might bolt or bite. He asked if he could come in and talk. I said for 15 minutes. What followed was probably the most honest conversation of our marriage. Which is a dark thing to say considering honesty is what he failed at in the first place. He told me he was ashamed on multiple levels. Ashamed that he had once been the kind of young man who ignored a call from an ex instead of acting like an adult. Ashamed that a daughter existed without him knowing. Ashamed that his first instinct when faced with something life-changing was not to come to me but to manage it privately until he could present it in some neater form. He admitted that part of him was afraid I would see him differently. Not because of the daughter itself, but because of what it said about his past and his lack of control. He said he kept imagining me looking at him like he was some stranger with hidden damage. I told him that by hiding it, he guaranteed exactly that. He cried then. Grant almost never cries. I can count on one hand the number of times I have seen it. At his father's bypass surgery. When Cooper got hit by a car and somehow survived. At my mother's funeral? No, my mother is still alive. That is how scrambled my brain has been. I meant at his uncle's funeral 3 years ago when he was sleep-deprived and emotional. It startled me enough in the moment that I nearly forgot to stay angry. But I did stay angry, because tears do not magically repair trust. He asked what I needed. I said the truth, all of it, even if it made him look bad. So he gave me more. He had met Elise once before the anniversary, briefly, in a public park with Melissa there. That was how they first confirmed they wanted the more serious one-on-one dinner. He did not tell me about that either. He said it had happened on a lunch break and he told himself it did not count as really meeting her because it was so short. To me, that just meant there had been even more secrecy than I knew. He admitted that after the Marlowe's dinner, he sat in his car for almost an hour because he knew he had destroyed something by not telling me. And could not figure out how to walk inside and be normal. He said that was why he came home late and blank and stupid. He was trying to switch identities in the driveway, from shocked new father to husband. And failed at both. He said Elise knows about me. He showed her photos. He told her he is married and that I am the person he has built his life with. He said she asked whether I knew about her and he lied. Told her, not yet. He said she looked disappointed but not surprised. That detail broke my heart in an entirely different direction. Imagine being that girl, trying to enter the orbit of a father you never knew. Only to find out he has not even told his wife you exist. She must have felt like a contamination. I asked whether he wanted a relationship with her. He said yes, if she wants one. I asked whether he expected me to just absorb that overnight. He said no. Then I asked the ugliest question I had been holding back. I asked if there was anyone else. Any other secret, any affair, emotional or physical, any debt, any other child, anything. I said if I found out later that this giant truth had merely been cover for another giant truth, I would never forgive him. He said no, absolute no. He handed me his phone, laptop, bank login, everything. I did not look right away because the gesture itself was almost more pathetic than reassuring. Total surrender after the fact. That weekend, instead of celebrating our anniversary, I sat at my dining room table with 3 legal pads and tried to figure out what exactly I was dealing with. On one page I wrote what hurt. On another I wrote what was objectively true. On the third I wrote what I needed to know before deciding whether my marriage was survivable. What hurt was obvious. He missed our anniversary. He lied by omission. He let me feel forgotten when the truth was that he was sharing a life-changing experience with someone else. He involved his sister, his boss in a partial way, and eventually his brother by crisis, before involving me. He chose secrecy over partnership. He took something that should have been ours to handle, and made it his to manage. What was objectively true was harder because it required me to separate ego from reality. He did not know about Elise until June, according to everything I could verify. He is her biological father. Her mother is dead. She is young and grieving and did not ask for any of this. His panic seems real. His shame seems real. His stupidity is extremely, painfully real. What I needed to know came down to trust, boundaries, and future. Can I trust him again? What role would Elise have in our life? How do I process the fact that my husband is now a father to an adult daughter he did not raise? If we stay married, what does that even look like? If we separate, am I doing that because he cheated, which apparently he did not? Or because the lying itself crossed a line I cannot uncross? Sunday night, Lauren came over with wine and no subtlety. She said she still thought the whole thing sounded insane, but after looking at the obituary, the photos and the dates, she believed it. Then she said, that doesn't mean you owe him instant forgiveness just because the secret had a tragic backstory. That is exactly the trap I have been fighting. People hear hidden daughter and immediately shift into soap opera mode, where everyone is too stunned by circumstance to hold the man accountable for his actual choices. But the circumstance is not what wrecked me. The choice did. The choice to let me be last in my own marriage. On Monday, Grant asked if I would consider counseling. I said yes, but not as a shortcut. Not as a place where I get pressured into empathy before I have even had room for anger. He agreed. We have our first appointment next week with a therapist named Drive Harper, who comes recommended by someone at my hospital. I do not know whether therapy will save anything. I just know I need a witness who is not related to either of us. I also told him that if Elise wants to meet me someday, I am open to it. But not now and not as some public relations repair job. I refuse to be used as proof that he has beautifully integrated his surprise daughter into a healed marriage. Real life does not work that fast. He said he understood. Since then, he has been staying mostly with Erin, coming by only when we agree on it. We text logistical things. He has sent a few long emotional messages I have not answered because I am not ready to comfort the person who created the wound. At the same time, I catch myself wondering what Elise is thinking. Whether she blames herself, whether she regrets reaching out, whether she sat across from Grant at Marlowe's on my anniversary, nervously folding her napkin in her lap, having no idea she was stepping into the center of a marriage landmine. I cannot be angry at her. I refuse to be. She did nothing wrong except exist at the wrong time for my peace of mind. The part that keeps replaying in my head, though, is embarrassingly small. It is not the paternity test, not the obituary, not even the receipt. It is that stupid morning in the kitchen when I was waiting for him to smile and say happy anniversary, and instead he asked about dry cleaning. I think that is the moment I am grieving most. The version of my life where I thought I knew what kind of morning I was having. The version where forgetting was the worst possible explanation. A lot of people think betrayal only counts if sex is involved. I do not agree. Betrayal is whatever makes you realize the reality you were living in was edited without your consent. That is what this feels like. I was walking through our marriage with the full confidence of someone who thinks both people are reading the same map, and then I found out he had been carrying extra pages. I have gone back and forth about whether I am being cruel by not moving more quickly toward compassion, because if I zoom way out, yes, what happened to Grant is huge. He found out he has a daughter. That is life-altering, disorienting. It would shake anyone. But marriage is supposed to be the place where that kind of shock gets brought home, not hidden from home. You do not get to say vows about partnership and then go underground the minute partnership becomes inconvenient. There is also the practical side people do not talk about enough. If Elise becomes part of our lives, there are emotional consequences, financial implications maybe. Family shifts, holiday questions, inheritance issues eventually, relationships with grandparents. Introductions, histories. This is not some abstract reveal. This is a whole person with a whole place that now has to be made or negotiated. I should have been included before any of that started taking shape. Instead, I am catching up to a story that already moved forward without me. Part of me wants to slam the door on all of it and say he made his choice when he kept the secret. Another part of me sees the man I have loved for 13 years. Sees how badly he mishandled something terrifying. And wonders whether one catastrophic failure has to define the rest of our life. Both parts are loud, neither one lets me sleep. Yesterday, Grant asked if he could at least tell me how the dinner went, meaning what Elise is like. What they talked about, what he learned about her. I said not yet. I think he looked surprised by that. Maybe because in his head the existence of a daughter is the main story now. For me, the main story is still that he let another woman know about the earthquake before he let me hear the tremor. I do not care if that sounds selfish. I have earned the right to be centered in my own pain for a minute. Still, I am human, and curiosity leaks through anger in weird ways. I know Elise studies elementary education. I know she likes lemon pie and runs half marathons and laughs with one shoulder lifted because Grant told me that much before I shut the conversation down. I know she brought a manila folder to dinner with copies of old photos because she thought he might want them. I know she asked whether he had other children and looked relieved when he said no because she was afraid of crashing into some perfect family. That phrase killed me. She had no idea. There is no perfect family here. There is just me, in my late 30s, sitting inside a marriage I thought was steady. Trying to decide whether trust broken by panic can be rebuilt or whether the break itself tells me everything I need to know. If anyone is wondering, yes, I still have the receipt. I do not know why I kept it. Maybe because it was the first honest object in the whole mess. Paper does not flinch or revise or start sentences with, "It's not what you think." It just says what happened. 2 dinners ordered, dessert shared, on my anniversary, somewhere else. I have read enough stories online to know people are going to divide cleanly into camps. Some will say he was overwhelmed and made a terrible judgment call during a life crisis. And that if everything else in the marriage was good, I should at least try to work through it. Others will say a man who can sit across from his secret daughter on his anniversary and then come home acting normal is a man too comfortable with compartmentalizing to ever fully trust again. The problem is I can argue both sides myself, and I hate that. What I know is this. If he had come to me the day he found out, sat me at this same kitchen table, and said, "Natalie, something impossible has happened and I don't know what to do," I would have been shocked, maybe devastated for different reasons. But I would have stood next to him while we figured it out. I know that about myself with complete certainty. I would have done the paternity test weight with him. I would have helped him decide how to meet her. I would have made space for his fear, his shame, his grief over lost years, all of it. I would have been his wife in the fullest sense of the word. Instead, he made me his audience after the reveal. That is the part one cannot get past. So now I am in this awful limbo where my husband did not cheat on me in the conventional way. But he still used secrecy, distance, and deception in a way that feels intimate and marital in its damage. I am trying not to make a permanent decision from temporary shock. But I also do not want to soften what happened just because the details are unusual enough to invite sympathy. I love the life we had. I may still love the man. I just do not know if I can trust the version of him who thought protecting himself from one hard conversation was worth risking our entire marriage, and I do not know what it means that on the morning of our anniversary, while I was standing in the kitchen waiting to be remembered, my husband was already on his way to a different table, carrying a truth big enough to change our lives and choosing, 1 minute at a time, not to bring me with him. Story number 4. My son asked why Daddy had 2 different houses. I thought he was imagining things until I followed him. I still feel sick writing this, and I keep deleting parts because every time I reread it, it sounds like something that happens to somebody who missed 10,000 warning signs. Not somebody like me who thought she had a boring, decent, middle-class marriage with the kind of problems people complain about in normal voices. I am not even sure where to start except with the sentence that cracked my whole life open. My son looked up at me over a bowl of macaroni 3 weeks ago and asked, completely casually, why Daddy had 2 different houses. My name is Emily. I am 34. My son is Owen and he is 6. My husband is Derek and he is 37. We live in a suburb outside Columbus, the kind of neighborhood with matching mailboxes, cracked basketball hoops over garages, and Facebook groups where people argue about fireworks and whether coyotes are dangerous. We have been married for 8 years and together for 11. Derek works in regional sales for a commercial flooring company, which means he has always had a schedule that made room for driving, client lunches, site visits, trade events, overnight trips that sounded boring enough for me to never question them. And a lot of, I'm running late, don't wait up. I work part-time at an orthodontics office and do most of the school stuff, groceries, pediatrician appointments, birthday gift buying, and all the invisible glue work that keeps a house from quietly falling apart. It was not glamorous, but I thought it was stable. If you had asked me a month ago whether I trusted my husband, I would have said yes without even thinking hard about it. Not because he was a perfect romantic hero. He is not. He leaves wet towels on the floor, forgets to text back, and has this irritating ability to start 10 home projects and finish 2. But he had never given me the kind of obvious reason that makes a woman start checking phone bills, or smelling collars or learning how to recognize lipstick brands. He was not overly protective of his phone. He did not suddenly start going to the gym at midnight. He did not treat me with contempt or pick constant fights or disappear for entire weekends. He was just busy, a little distracted the last year maybe, a little more tired, a little more guarded when I asked about money. But we have a child and a mortgage and inflation like everyone else. So I told myself adulthood just wears people down in ordinary ways. Then Owen said that sentence. It happened on a Tuesday. I know that because Tuesday is my later shift at the office and my mom, Carol, picks Owen up from day camp in the afternoon. I got home around 6, started boiling pasta, and Owen was doing that non-stop talking kids do when they are overtired and trying to tell you every thought before it evaporates. He was talking about a boy named Mason who pushed in line at camp, and how the popsicles there are, the hard kind not the good kind, and how Grandma Carol says my hydrangeas look thirsty. Then out of nowhere he said, "Mom, why does Daddy have 2 houses?" I genuinely thought I misheard him. I said, "What did you say?" He was stirring his noodles around with one finger because rules are apparently decorative to first graders, and he repeated it like it was obvious. Why does Daddy have two houses? He has this house and his other house. I laughed, not because it was funny but because that is what your body does sometimes when reality shows up wearing a clown nose. I said, Daddy does not have another house, buddy. What do you mean? Owen shrugged and said, the little house where Ava has the blue room. There are moments when your whole body notices danger before your mind catches up. My hand actually went cold on the wooden spoon. I asked him who Ava was, and he said, the girl at Daddy's other house. Then he kept eating like he had just told me the sky was blue. I sat across from him and asked where this other house was. He scrunched his face up and said, I don't know, we go in Daddy's car. I asked who Ava was again and he said, she's little, that was it, just little. Then he asked if he could have more cheese on his macaroni. I wish I could say I handled that like a calm adult. I did not. I tried not to scare him. But I know my voice changed because he kept looking at me like maybe I was the one saying weird stuff now. I asked when he had gone to this house. He said, sometimes. I asked if I had ever been there. He said no. I asked if anyone else was there besides Ava. He said, her mom. Daddy talks to her in the kitchen. Then he told me I was asking too many questions and started making his noodles into a bridge. That night I barely heard anything Derek said when he got home. He kissed Owen on the head, complained about traffic on 270, reheated some chicken, and asked me if I had mailed the water bill. I kept staring at him, trying to see something new in his face. Something villainous. Something stupid. Something that said secret life. But he just looked like Derek. Same work polo. Same shallow crease between his eyebrows when he is hungry. Same wedding ring. Same ordinary man I had fallen asleep beside for years. I did not confront him that night because I wanted to believe there was a simple explanation. Maybe Owen was mixing up houses from a TV show or another kid's story. Maybe Derek had taken him to a client's open house once and there happened to be a kid there. Maybe Ava was a cousin or a neighbor's child and Daddy's other house was just how a 6-year-old described a place his father had visited more than once. Kids are weird. Kids say things that sound criminal when they mean somebody bought the wrong juice. So I waited until the next day and brought it up casually. I asked Derek over breakfast if he had taken Owen anywhere recently that might have confused him. Derek looked at me over his coffee and said, like where? I said, he was talking about some other house and a little girl named Ava. I expected confusion or amusement. What I got was smaller and harder to pin down. A pause. Too fast to call guilt if I had not been watching for it. Then he smiled and said, oh, that. I brought him by my coworker Jenna's place once when I had to drop off some sample binders in. Couldn't leave him in the car. She's got a daughter around his age. He probably mashed it together in his head. Then he laughed a little and said, your son's imagination is expensive. Tell him I can barely afford one house. It was a good answer. Too good maybe, but clean on the surface. Jenna existed. I had heard the name before. A younger account manager from his office. I think I had met her once at a Christmas party years ago. Blonde, cheerful, maybe early 30s. It fit. I wanted it to fit. So I nodded like that explanation made sense and let the conversation move on. But something about it stayed under my skin all day. Not even just the pause. It was how he answered. Not curious, not, what weird thing did our child say now, but immediate containment. Like the explanation had been waiting near the door. That weekend I tried asking Owen again, more gently. We were building a Lego garbage truck on the living room rug and I asked if he remembered Ava. He said yes. I asked if Ava was his friend. He said no, she is Daddy's friend too. I asked if Ava's mom was Miss Jenna. He looked at me blankly and said, no, Miss Lily. That was the first time I felt real fear instead of vague suspicion. I said, who is Miss Lily? He said, Ava's mom. She makes the triangle sandwiches. Then he made the garbage truck crash into the dog's water bowl and that ended the conversation. Now I had two names. Ava and Lily, no Jenna. I spent that night on the couch pretending to watch some dumb HGTV renovation show while Derek scrolled sports highlights next to me. I kept hearing Owen's voice in my head. Miss Lily. Triangle sandwiches. Details make lies feel true. Little domestic details make them feel deadly. The next morning while Derek was mowing the lawn, I looked at our bank statements online. I know some people will say that was invasive. But I am on all the accounts too and I do most of our budgeting. So it was not like hacking into Fort Knox. Usually I pay bills and move on. This time I slowed down. I looked at restaurants, gas, grocery stores, random card charges. At first nothing. Then a pattern started to show up once I stopped scanning like a wife and started scanning like a stranger. There were charges across town in a neighborhood Derek had no reason to be in regularly. A Kroger over there, a pizza place over there, a gas station over there. Not every week. Not enough to scream second family to somebody casually reviewing things, but enough that once you saw it, you could not unsee it. There were also a handful of ATM withdrawals I did not remember us discussing. Usually 200 here, 100 there. We are not rich enough for unexplained cash to be invisible. I still was not at certainty. I was standing in that horrible middle place where every explanation looks possible if you squint hard enough. Maybe he had a client there. Maybe the pizza place was near a showroom. Maybe the ATM withdrawals were for tips, school fundraisers. Or something else boring I had forgotten. I hated that uncertainty more than I can explain. I told my younger sister Rachel. Because Rachel is the person I call when I need someone to tell me whether I am being insane or not. Rachel is 31, divorced, sharp-tongued, and constitutionally incapable of giving a soothing answer when a blunt one is available. She listened without interrupting, then said, "Emily, either your kid invented a secret girl and her mother for fun, or your husband has an entire arrangement you don't know about. Which one sounds more likely to you?" Quote, I said I did not know, and she said, "You do know. You just don't want to." That made me angry, but only because she was hitting something raw. Rachel told me not to confront him until I had proof, not because she watches crime shows, but because once a liar knows what you know, they get better at hiding things. I hated that sentence too because hearing my own husband described as a liar made me feel like I had already crossed some invisible line. Over the next week I watched Derek in a way I had never watched him before. It is terrifying how much you can learn just by shutting up and paying attention. He had 2 phones, technically. One personal, one work issued. I had always known that, but suddenly I noticed he kept the work phone closer. He charged it in our bedroom at night instead of leaving it in his office bag. He took it into the bathroom sometimes. He started saying, I might need to stop by a site, more often when he had Owen with him on Saturdays. He also became very specific with me in a way that seemed designed to sound transparent. Running to Westerville for a meeting. Heading to Reynoldsburg for a warehouse visit. Client lunch at 1. It sounded normal until I realized normal people do not narrate their movements like someone trying to establish an alibi in advance. Then there was the Saturday that really changed everything. Derek told me he was taking Owen to a hardware store and then to get donuts because he missed his little man time. The phrasing annoyed me because I am the one who usually arranges fun stuff while he gets credit for random outings, but that is another issue. They left around 9. By 11, Owen had not come back and Derek had not texted, which was not unheard of. But my nerves were already frayed. At 11:30 I texted asking if they needed me to start lunch. No answer. At noon, Owen's tablet pinged because I have family location sharing set up on it for emergencies. I almost never check it. That day I did. They were nowhere near a hardware store. The dot was across town, in the exact area where those bank charges had been piling up. I stared at the screen for a full minute before my brain started moving again. Then I grabbed my keys, called Rachel with shaking hands, and told her I was going. She said, "Do not be dramatic when you get there. Just see, just get the truth." I drove like I was outside my own body. The neighborhood was older than ours, small ranch homes, chain link fences, faded porch furniture. Tricycles left in yards. The tablet location settled on a street lined with narrow houses close together. I parked half a block away because I suddenly felt stupid and exposed. Like every person on the street would know I was there to catch my husband in a secret life. Then I walked. The house was pale yellow with dark green shutters and a little plastic slide in the yard. There was a silver Honda in the driveway I did not recognize, and behind it was Derek's car. I wish I could say I stormed up and pounded on the door. I did not. I stood across the street beside somebody's overgrown hedge and watched my own husband come out of that house carrying my son on one hip while a little girl with curly brown hair ran after them, holding a juice box. Right behind them came a woman with auburn hair twisted into a messy knot, no makeup, denim shorts, and the kind of face that would have seemed completely ordinary in any other context. She smiled at Owen. Owen smiled back. Derek set Owen down, knelt to zip his hoodie, and the little girl tugged on his sleeve like she had done it 1,000 times before. Then the woman leaned forward and kissed Derek on the mouth. That was the moment I stopped being confused. You spend all this time thinking the worst part of betrayal will be the information. It is not. It is the visual. It is seeing another woman touch the man whose face you know better than your own. Fathers, it is seeing your child in a scene you were never told existed. It is the ease of their bodies. Nobody looked guilty. Nobody looked secretive. They looked like a family saying goodbye after lunch. I do not remember deciding to cross the street. Suddenly I was doing it. Derek saw me first. His whole face drained. The woman followed his gaze and went still. Owen, sweet clueless Owen, just yelled, "Mom," like this was some fun surprise intersection of his worlds. I asked one question. I said, "Who is she?" Derek said, "Emily." Not an answer. Just my name like a warning or a plea. I said it again, louder. "Who is she?" The woman spoke before he did. She looked confused, then scared, then furious all in about 2 seconds. She said, "I'm Lily. Who are you?" I laughed, and it sounded ugly even to me. "I'm his wife." It is a strange thing to watch another woman's face collapse for the exact same reason yours already did. Lily stepped back like Derek had physically shoved her. "What?" Derek started talking fast, the way people do when their brain is trying to patch 10 holes with one hand. He said it was not what it looked like. Then maybe realized how absurd that sounded because it looked exactly like what it was. He said he could explain. He said please not in front of the kids. He said Emily, please. I barely heard him because all I could focus on was the little girl, Ava, hiding half behind Lily's leg and looking up at Derek like she could not understand why the grown-ups suddenly sounded different. Owen tugged on my hand and said, "Mom, this is the other house. If I live to be 100, I will never forget those words." Lily looked between me and Owen and Derek, and I watched understanding hit her in waves. Not the whole thing at once. First the wife part, then the son part, then what that meant for every lie that must have brought us there. Her face went white. She said, very quietly, "You said you were divorced." Derek closed his eyes. I think part of me had still expected some wild explanation. A work emergency, an estranged cousin, a landlord situation, anything. But hearing her say that snapped the last thread. There was no misunderstanding, no paperwork issue, no separate bed marriage, no technicality, no. We were taking a break. He had a whole girlfriend, at minimum, maybe more, in another house, with my son visiting. I told Derek to put Owen in my car. He tried to say we should talk privately and I said, "Put my son in my car right now before I make this the loudest street in Ohio." That moved him. While he walked Owen toward me, Lily said, "How long have you been married?" Her voice sounded flat, like she was already speaking through shock. I told her 8 years. Her mouth opened a little and then she looked at Ava, then back at me, and I knew there was more. I asked her how long she had been with him. She said, almost 4 years. 4 years. Ava looked maybe 3, maybe a little older. I am not great at kids' ages unless they are my own. But the math began clawing at me instantly. I asked, "How old is your daughter?" Lily did not answer right away. She just stared at Derek like maybe she wanted him to be the one to say it. He was looking at the ground. Finally she said, "She turned 3 in May." That answer did something so violent to my insides I had to grip my car door to stay upright. Derek had not just been cheating. He had been cheating long enough, deep enough, successfully enough, that there was a child. Maybe his, maybe not, but there was a child in a blue room at the other house. I got Owen buckled in and told him we were going to Grandma Carol's for a while. He asked if Ava could come too, and I nearly broke in half right there. I told him not today. He looked disappointed, not scared. Which told me all I needed to know about how normalized these visits had become. Then I turned back to Derek and Lily and said I wanted the truth from both of them, separately. But not on the sidewalk with the kids there. Lily said I could come back after she dropped Ava at her mother's house. Derek asked to come home with me. I said no. I said if he followed my car, I would drive straight to the police station just for the audience. At my mother's house, Carol took one look at me and did not ask questions in front of Owen. She just took him into the kitchen for cookies and cartoons while I stood in her laundry room. Shaking so hard I thought I might throw up. I called Rachel and when she answered, I just said, "It's real." She was silent for a second, then asked where I was. And within 20 minutes she was there. Rachel has always been one of those people who gets calmer as things get worse. While I cried in my mother's laundry room like a complete disaster, she grabbed me water, made me sit down, and asked practical questions. Did I have access to all our money? Was the house in both names? Did I know whether his phone was on our account? Did I want her to stay when I met Lily? It felt surreal, like my life had become a binder somebody else was organizing. I did go back to Lily's house that evening. Rachel drove because I was too shaky. Derek was not there. Good. I did not want him controlling the temperature in the room. Lily opened the door looking like she had cried hard and then washed her face in cold water too. Function. She asked if Rachel was my lawyer and Rachel said, "Sister," in a tone that suggested that was probably worse. We sat at Lily's kitchen table. Same kitchen where my husband had apparently stood talking while my son watched cartoons. Same kitchen where triangle sandwiches got made. There were construction paper handprints on the fridge and a basket of little girl shoes by the door. Every domestic detail felt like an insult. Lily told me her side. Her full name is Lily Bennett. She is 32. She works as a medical billing specialist and met Derek when he was doing a renovation estimate at the office suite where she worked part-time before moving jobs. He told her he was separated and waiting on a divorce that was ugly because of property and custody stuff. He said his ex, meaning me apparently, made things difficult and used their son as leverage. I had to physically stop Rachel from talking at that part because she made a sound like she was about to launch herself across the table. Lily said Derek told her he was staying between places at first, then later rented a condo with a roommate, which in hindsight she thinks was probably just his work travel cover. He saw her mostly weekdays and some Saturdays. He missed holidays more than she liked, but he framed it as keeping peace until the divorce is finalized. He had never posted her online. He had never introduced her to his parents. He always had a reason. His family was private. His mother was judgmental. The paperwork was taking forever. His ex was unstable. Every cheating cliché on earth came out of his mouth apparently. And because it was distributed over years in small believable doses, she believed him. When she got pregnant, he panicked but then stepped up. Those were her words, and I almost laughed at the choice. He helped with doctor appointments when he could. He paid some bills in cash. He bought nursery furniture. He was present at the hospital for the birth, though he told her he could not stay overnight because of a work crisis. He visited Ava regularly ever since. Not daily, not fully, but enough that Ava knows him as daddy. That last part made the room tilt for me. I asked if Ava is legally his. Lily said his name is not on the birth certificate because at the time he said the divorce might get messier if it looked like overlap had happened before paperwork was done. She said she hated that explanation but accepted it because she was exhausted and loved him and thought they were building towards something official. She has text messages, photos, doctor appointment screenshots, birthday gifts signed dad. She has years of it. Rachel asked if there was a paternity test. Lily said no. She never thought she needed one because there was no question in her mind. I looked at the fridge again because there was a picture held up by a ladybug magnet of Ava at some fall festival, and even from across the kitchen I could see Derek in her face around the eyes and mouth. Maybe I was projecting, maybe not. Then came the part that somehow hurt in a different direction. Lily had no idea about me. None. She knew there was an ex-wife named Emily because Derek had told her there was one. But in her version I was a bitter almost former spouse clinging to a dead marriage. She did not know he still lived in my house. She did not know he wore his wedding ring to work events. She thought when he skipped Christmas morning it was because our custody agreement alternated. She thought Owen was my and Derek's child from a dissolved marriage that was in its last paperwork stage. She cried when she realized Owen had been brought to her house under that lie too. She said she thought it was maybe inappropriate but also hopeful. Like Derek was trying to blend families eventually. She said Ava loved playing with him and had started asking when AITA would come back. That name hit me like a slap because it was so intimate and childish and real. I believed Lily by the end of that conversation. And I hated that too because I did not want another woman in my tragedy to become sympathetic. It would be easier if she were knowingly vicious. But she just looked wrecked. Wrecked and embarrassed and angry at herself for not seeing it sooner. We were two women sitting in a kitchen both realizing we had been edited into different versions of the same man's story. When I got home to my mother's house, Derek was in the driveway. I almost told Rachel to keep driving. But then I decided I was done letting him control when truth happened. I got out and told Rachel to stay in the car with the engine running because if I stayed too long, she had permission to start recording and make a scene. Derek looked awful, no dramatic bruised knuckle way. Just gray, sweaty, flattened by consequence. He said, please let me explain. I said, unless the explanation is that your identical twin has been fathering children and using your face, I am not interested in creative writing. He said he had made terrible choices and things got out of control. Out of control, as though secret households sprout like mold if you ignore them long enough. I asked him how many lies it takes before something counts as a whole life. He started crying then, which would have moved me if I had not just spent the last 6 hours learning how methodical his deceit actually was. He admitted most of it, not gracefully, not fully at first. I had to pull answers out of him while he kept trying to shift from confession into self-defense. He met Lily 4 years ago and started sleeping with her within a month. At the time, he told himself it was temporary because our marriage was already bad. News to me, apparently, already bad, meant I was exhausted after Owen was born. We argued about money. And I stopped making him feel admired enough. I am including that because if I do not, someone will assume there was some giant hidden martial misery I skipped over. There was not. We had normal strain. He had entitled weakness. He never intended to get Lily pregnant. Also news I could have predicted from any random man in history. When she told him, he thought everything would collapse. Instead, he discovered that if he lied to 2 women in complementary ways and kept excellent track of his calendar, both lives could continue. That is the sentence I heard even if it is not the one he said. He insisted he loved Owen and me. He insisted he also loved Ava. He said Lily became real to him in a way he did not know how to end once the lie got going. He said each month it felt harder to confess because the damage grew. He said he hated himself. He said he was constantly stressed. He said he knew he deserved whatever happened next. Every sentence had I in it. Even his remorse was selfish. I asked him whether there were any other women. He said no. I asked if anyone else knew. He hesitated and said his friend Brent knew pieces of it. That sent a fresh bolt of rage through me because Brent has been at our house for barbecues. Brent has eaten my potato salad and watched my son open birthday presents while apparently carrying at least fragments of this secret. Brent, another very ordinary American man with a baseball cap and a wife named Jessica who now repulses me by association. I asked about money. Derek said he had been giving Lily cash and covering expenses when he could, using bonuses, commissions, side jobs, and some of the ATM withdrawals I had noticed. I asked whether any marital money had gone toward her household. He tried saying it was complicated. I said, it is actually very simple. Did you spend our money on your girlfriend and her child? He cried harder and said yes. That was the first time I physically recoiled from him. Not because of the sex. Not even because of the years. Because while I was cutting coupons and moving money around so we would not carry too much on the credit card at Christmas, he was financing another reality. My reality was budgeting dental copays. His was buying nursery furniture for his affair child. He wanted to come inside my mother's house and talk more. I told him he was not stepping 1 foot near our son until I decided what safe looked like. He said that was not fair. I said fairness left town when he built a second family and let our child wander between them like it was normal. He said Ava is innocent. I said, do not you dare use that little girl as a shield with me. He shut up after that. The next few days were a blur of logistics, humiliation, anger, and the strange surreal task of continuing basic parenting while your entire nervous system is on fire. Owen kept asking when he could see Daddy and when he could go back to the blue room and whether Ava missed him. Every question felt like stepping on broken glass. Carol told me not to answer emotionally in front of him, which was easier advice than practice. I just kept saying grown-up things were complicated right now and that none of this was his fault. He started wetting the bed again after almost a year without accidents. That was when I realized even if he does not understand betrayal, he understands instability. I met with a family law attorney 2 days later because Rachel practically dragged me there. And I am glad she did because I would have wasted a week crying in circles otherwise. The lawyer, Michelle, is one of those calm women who somehow make legal language sound maternal. She listened, took notes, and never once widened her eyes even when I told her about finding the other house because apparently human beings are horrible in highly repetitive ways. Michelle told me to gather everything. Bank statements, tax returns, phone records if possible, photos, messages, a written timeline while events were fresh. She said not to move out of the marital home. She said not to make threats over text I would regret later. She said if Derek is the biological father of Ava, that will create a whole separate legal track. But my priority right now is protecting myself financially and protecting Owen emotionally. She also said something that has stuck with me. She said, "You do not need to solve the moral question before solving the practical one." That mattered because I was still wasting energy asking myself whether leaving immediately made me cruel or strong or impulsive. The law, as it turns out, does not care about those adjectives first. I went back to the house alone that Friday while Derek was at work. Just me, the quiet, and a marriage sitting in objects. His boots by the mudroom. The coffee mug he always uses. The screwdriver set he bought and never put away. I walked through every room feeling like a guest in a place I had cleaned for years. Then I did the ugliest thing I have ever done besides maybe ignoring my intuition. I searched drawers, closet shelves, his office, the trunk of his car. Every paper folder in the cabinet, every bag. Not because I wanted to become that person. Because I already understood that the version of my life accessible through polite conversation was a lie. I found receipts from a pediatric urgent care near Lily's neighborhood. A stuffed rabbit in the trunk with a gift tag ripped off. A photo booth strip tucked in the back of his desk drawer with Derek, Ava on his lap. And Lily leaning against his shoulder. They looked happy, not scandal happy, boring family happy, Costco on a Saturday happy. That picture destroyed me more than finding anything sexual would have. Sex can be compartmentalized. Smiling for 4 poses with a toddler cannot. I also found a small storage unit bill paid monthly. That led to another whole layer. When Rachel went with me the next day to check it, because yes I had keys and yes I was past the point of shame, it turned out to be furniture. Baby items, old clothes, and bins labeled with Ava's name in Sharpie. He had literally been warehousing evidence. You know what is crazy? Even after that, part of me still wanted him to sit down and say one thing that would make the last decade legible again. Not forgivable, just legible. Something like I never loved her, or I was trying to leave, or I was trapped, or I was sick. Or literally anything that would make this less deliberate. But every time we spoke, he just revealed another layer of maintenance. Separate email, different stories for late nights, careful use of cash, calendar coding for work trips that were not work. It was not one stupid affair that snowballed. It was management. He managed us. Lily called me again on Sunday. I almost did not answer, but I am glad I did. She had confronted Derek too and gotten more truth than before. He admitted he was still fully married, not separated. He admitted he had never filed anything. He admitted I knew nothing. She told him not to contact her unless it was about Ava and only after he proved paternity formally. She sounded wrecked but clear. There was something almost terrible about how quickly we moved from strangers to co-victims. She apologized to me even though I told her this was not hers to apologize for. Then she said something that made me cry after I hung up. She said, "I keep thinking about your son thinking my house was just one of his dad's houses. Like that was normal. I am so sorry." That was the first apology in this whole mess that felt unselfish. Owen has started bringing Ava up in the weirdest moments. While brushing his teeth, while looking for crayons, he asked if she would still have a birthday. He asked if Daddy sleeps at her house too. I asked why he thought that, very carefully, and he said, "Sometimes when it gets dark." That sentence told me more than Derek ever intended. My son had been in that house at night. Maybe dinner, maybe more, maybe long enough to believe Daddy had 2 homes because from his perspective he did. I cannot fully explain what that does to a mother. The cheating was one wound. Realizing my child had been quietly acclimated to deception as a structure of family was another. He was not just covering an affair. He was recruiting our son into the logistics without Owen knowing what he was participating in. I do not know how to forgive that. Honestly, I do not know if I even want to. Derek keeps asking for one honest conversation. That phrase alone makes me want to scream because if he wanted honesty, he had 4 years and 2 households to experiment with it. He wrote me a long email because I blocked his texts except for parenting emergencies. In it he said he grew up learning to avoid conflict because his father, Stephen, was explosive and his mother, Denise, buried problems under politeness. And that somewhere along the way he became the kind of man who tries to postpone pain until the postponement becomes cruelty. I actually believe that. I also do not care enough for it to save him. He says he loves me. He says he loves Owen. He says he never meant for any of this to happen. I believe the last part in the narrowest possible sense. Meaning I am sure he did not set out as a teenager dreaming of one wife, one girlfriend, 2 kids in different houses, and a storage unit full of lies. But once it started happening, he chose it over and over. Intention matters less to me now than repetition. Michelle, my lawyer, says I need to stop thinking of his tears as evidence of character and start thinking of his actions as evidence of pattern. That sentence deserves to be carved into a wall somewhere. Pattern, not panic, not one mistake. Pattern. I have told only a small circle so far because humiliation has its own gravity. My mom knows. Rachel knows. Michelle obviously knows. My best friend Hannah knows because she noticed I was answering every text like a hostage. Derek's parents know now too. Because apparently he finally told them the real story after years of whatever partial fantasy he had sold everyone else. Denise called me sobbing, which I did not have the energy for. Steven sent one stiff text saying he was deeply disappointed in Derek. Good for him. I am sure that repairs the universe. Brent's wife Jessica called me yesterday after apparently learning her husband knew enough to keep his mouth shut. She cried and apologized and said she had no idea. I believe her, but I also found no comfort in it. Everyone seems desperate to prove they are not as bad as the worst person in the story. I do not currently have space to rank them. The practical side is ugly. Michelle thinks temporary custody arrangements will be tricky because while Derek is still Owen's father, I have legitimate concerns about judgment, deception, and introducing him to unstable adult situations under false pretenses. The financial side is uglier. I do not yet know how much money left our marriage for Lily's house. I do not yet know whether there are debts. I do not yet know whether he has been honest on taxes. I feel like every day I open another drawer in my life and find termites. And still, somehow, the most haunting moments are the small ones. Owen asking if Ava can come to his birthday. Derek automatically reaching for the coffee he used to make in our kitchen before remembering he is not living there right now. Finding one of Ava's crayons in the backseat of Derek's car beside Owen's lost sneaker. Tiny evidence that 2 childhoods were being arranged around each other without my knowledge. I keep replaying the past 4 years and trying to see whether there were signs I dismissed because I was too busy being responsible. There were more overnight trade events after Lily got pregnant. More cash withdrawals. More vague irritation whenever I asked for help with weekend errands. A couple of unexplained colds he blamed on hotel air conditioning. A strange tenderness one Christmas when he cried watching Owen sleep. And I thought maybe he was just overwhelmed by fatherhood. Maybe he was thinking about the daughter he had somewhere else. Maybe he had just left another child's house. I will never know what memory belongs to which life now. And that is one of the things I resent most. He contaminated the archive. If anyone asks why I did not know, the answer is boring and humiliating. Because I trusted the father of my son. Because adult life is tiring and suspicion takes energy. Because he was not a cartoon villain leaving lipstick on collars and falling asleep with a burner phone in his pocket. He was disciplined. He lied in tones I was used to hearing. He weaponized normalcy. I also keep thinking about Lily's daughter, Ava, because she is innocent in the most complete sense. She did not ask to be conceived inside deception. She did not ask to know my son before either of his mothers knew the truth. She did not ask to call a man daddy if he was only visiting by schedule gaps and lies. Whatever legal test comes next, whatever paternity says on paper, that little girl already has emotional facts in her body. So does Owen. The adults made a disaster and now the children are living in the weather of it. That is the part making me the most savage with Derek right now. If he had just cheated, I would still be shattered. But he did not keep it in the category of sex and shame and private betrayal. He expanded it into architecture, houses, routines, a child's vocabulary. My son literally learned to understand his father through divided geography because Derek made that arrangement normal enough to survive in a 6-year-old's mind. The last time I saw Derek in person was 2 nights ago at my mother's house because Owen wanted to give him a drawing. It was supposed to be a short supervised visit. Owen ran into his arms and Derek cried so hard he had to turn away. For one horrible split second, I felt sorry for him. Then Owen said, "Daddy, when can we all go to the Blue House again?" And the look on Derek's face reminded me exactly why my sympathy is dangerous. He created a reality that even now he cannot cleanly explain to his own son. So here I am, married, technically, not reconciled, not remotely ready to decide whether this ends in divorce papers, court battles, therapy, DNA tests, or all of the above. I am sleeping in my childhood bedroom half the week because my mother insists. I should not be alone when my brain is this loud. Rachel is helping me make spreadsheets of transactions like we are doing forensic accounting for a life I never consented to fund. Michelle is preparing filings. Lily is getting a paternity test arranged because she says she never wants to doubt what is true. Again, smart woman. And me, I keep hearing my son's small voice over macaroni asking why daddy has 2 different houses. Like he was asking why some birds fly south. Simple, innocent, solvable. He had no idea he was handing me the first honest piece of information anybody had given me in months, maybe years. That is what gets me most. The only person in this entire situation who told the truth cleanly was the 6-year-old. I do not know what I am asking for here except maybe to put this somewhere outside my own body. Because carrying it alone feels impossible. I do not need people telling me my husband is trash. I know. I do not need people romanticizing how hard this must be for him either because he was not struck by lightning. He laid the wire himself. Mostly I think I need to know whether anyone else has ever had their life split open by something so bizarrely domestic. Not a hotel receipt, not lipstick, not a stranger's message, a child asking why daddy has 2 houses. If I had brushed it off one more time, if I had laughed and said kids say the craziest things, I genuinely do not know how long this would have gone on. Another year maybe, maybe more, maybe until both kids were old enough to compare notes in front of me. That thought alone is enough to make me feel cold all over again. Story number 5. I found a receipt hidden inside my husband's suitcase. The date on it destroyed every lie he ever told. I found the receipt because one wheel snapped off my suitcase in the parking garage at O'Hare and I didn't feel like buying a new one 2 days before my cousin's wedding. My husband Daniel has this black Tumi carry-on he treats better than most people treat their firstborn. He wipes it down after trips. He stores it in the hall closet instead of the basement. He once got weirdly annoyed when my younger sister Brooke tossed a denim jacket on top of it at Thanksgiving. Not angry, exactly, just sharp in that polished Daniel way. Like, hey, can we not? With a smile that still somehow made the room go quiet. So when I dragged it into our bedroom that Thursday night in July, I actually hesitated for a second, like I was borrowing something expensive from a museum. I'm 34, Daniel is 39, and we live in Naperville, Illinois, in one of those subdivisions where every backyard has a grill, a patio set, and at least one golden retriever named something human like Oliver or Theo. We have a yellow lab named Murphy who sheds year-round and believes privacy is a personal attack. I work in HR for a healthcare software company in downtown Chicago 3 days a week. Daniel is, or was, a regional sales director for a hospitality tech company. That job was the reason for everything, according to him. The travel, the late nights, the missed dinners, the separate calendars, the 2 phones. The exhaustion, the fact that he always seemed to be leaving or recovering from leaving. If you had met us from the outside, you would have thought we were solid. Married 6 years, together 9. Same group of couple friends since our early 30s. Nice house. Nice Christmas cards. We hosted a 4th of July cookout every year. He remembered everyone's drink order. He kissed my forehead when he passed behind my chair. My mom used to say, "You got one of the good ones," in this half-joking, half-serious way that made my sisters roll their eyes because they thought she was corny. I used to think that too. I unzipped the inner lining of the suitcase because Murphy hair had somehow worked its way under the fabric panel, and I wanted to vacuum it out before I packed. The lining felt a little loose along the bottom edge, like something had slipped underneath the cardboard insert. I stuck my hand in there expecting lint or maybe one of those tiny hotel pens. Instead, I pulled out a crumpled receipt folded into quarters. Target, Kirkwood, Missouri. I almost threw it away without looking at it because Daniel is the kind of man who comes home from a 3-day trip with 6 receipts in his pockets, 2 dead hotel key cards, and a tiny bottle of Advil he stole from a conference room. Then I glanced at the date. December 24, 2025. And I swear to God the room actually tilted. That date wasn't just familiar. It was burned into me. Christmas Eve last year was the day Daniel told me he was stranded in Denver. He'd been in Phoenix that week for a quarterly leadership summit. He called around 4 in the afternoon sounding frustrated and tired. Said weather had wrecked everything, O'Hare was a mess, his connection through Denver got cancelled. And the best he could do was a flight out the next morning if the storm cleared. I was standing in my mom's kitchen in Oak Brook with a foil pan of sweet potatoes in my hands while my sisters pretended not to watch my face. He FaceTimed me around 8 that night from what looked like an airport seating area. I remember fluorescent light, beige carpet, his blue quarter zip, and a row of empty chairs behind him. He kept the call short because, he said, his battery was dying and he was trying to sweet-talk a gate agent into a hotel voucher. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve defending him to my family. Brooke said, "It's weird he always gets stranded on the holidays." My older sister Kate said, "Every airline app on Earth exists and somehow he's the only person we know living out a Tom Hanks movie every major holiday?" And I got mad. I said they were being unfair, that not everyone worked a 9 to 5. That his territory covered half the country, that travel in winter was unpredictable. My mom, trying to calm things down, squeezed my hand and said, "He'd be here if he could, honey." He texted me at 11:43 that night. "Sorry this is such a mess. Love you. Tell your mom I owe her prime rib." I stared at the receipt in my hand and felt all the blood leave my face. It wasn't just the location. It was what he bought. Matching family pajamas, men's large, women's medium, girls size 8, boys 5T, Pillsbury cinnamon rolls, gift tags that said from Santa, batteries, children's Motrin, 2 Hot Wheels cars, Scotch tape, a bottle of Cabernet. The total was $186.42, paid with a Visa ending in 1142. Daniel's Visa. I knew the last 4 digits because I had booked enough anniversary dinners and reimbursed enough. Home Depot runs on our shared budgeting spreadsheet to recognize them on site. I sat on the edge of the bed holding that stupid thermal paper like it might suddenly rearrange itself into something harmless. At first I did what I think a lot of women do when something impossible lands in their lap. I made excuses for the man before I made sense for myself. Maybe he bought last-minute gifts for a client. Maybe someone borrowed his card. Maybe the date printed wrong. Maybe Kirkwood was near the airport. Maybe those pajamas were for some charity drive. Maybe. Then I remembered the kids' sizes. The cinnamon rolls. The Santa tags. The Motrin. Nothing about that receipt said airport. It said home. Daniel was due back from Milwaukee the next evening. I had about 24 hours before I needed to either become the kind of wife who asked careful questions and accepted whatever smooth answer she got, or become someone else entirely. I ended up becoming someone I didn't recognize. I took photos of the receipt from every angle and slid it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I packed my dress, shoes, and makeup bag into the suitcase like nothing had happened. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my curling iron twice. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes I pictured him in some other kitchen on Christmas morning, pulling cinnamon rolls out of an oven, helping a little kid open Hot Wheels. Living inside a life I didn't know existed while I sat at my mother's table insisting he loved me. By 7 the next morning I was in my home office with my laptop open and Murphy pressed against my leg. I texted my boss that I needed to take a personal day. Then I started digging. Daniel and I weren't the kind of couple who went through each other's phones. At least I thought we weren't. In reality, Daniel had structured our life in a way that looked private but mature. He had his company phone and his personal phone. His laptop was for work, his iPad stayed home for streaming. He handled our taxes because he liked the numbers. He booked most of his own travel because he already had all his reward accounts. He kept his work calendar separate because his meetings moved around constantly and there's no point sinking the chaos. I had always framed that as competence. That morning it looked a lot more like architecture. His iPad was on the kitchen counter plugged in beside the coffee machine. I knew the passcode because we used it to order takeout and look up recipes. I told myself I was only searching for Target emails, only confirming what I already knew. I found much more than that. His Gmail search bar auto filled the word Target after I typed TA, which told me I was not the first person in that inbox to care about Target. There were dozens of digital receipts from the same store in Kirkwood, Missouri. Not 1 or 2, dozens, back to at least 2023. School supplies, kids' shoes, a Paw Patrol comforter, Valentine cards, Easter basket filler, women's skincare products I definitely did not own, a pink bike helmet, a set of white Christmas lights, pickup notifications sent to Daniel Collins at an address on Briarwood Lane in Kirkwood. Not a hotel, a townhouse. I think that was the moment denial finally died. I sat there in our kitchen, in my own house, wearing an oversized Northwestern sweatshirt and last night's mascara, staring at an address attached to my husband's name and feeling like I had somehow wandered into a stranger's inbox by mistake. Then I found the school emails. North Glendale Elementary weekly newsletter. A reminder about Spirit Week. A sign-up genius for classroom snacks. A pediatric dentist appointment confirmation for Ava M. A soccer registration receipt for O&C. There was also a separate email thread with a woman named Rachel Mercer. Her profile picture was two kids on a beach, faces smeared with sunscreen, hair blown sideways by wind. The emails themselves were domestic in a way that made me physically sick. Can you grab milk on your way in? Ava needs black flats for the concert by Thursday. Owen fell asleep on the couch. I moved him upstairs. Don't forget your mom asked if we're still coming Sunday. Love you. Love you too. Not once. Repeatedly. Casually. The way married people text when they are not trying to sound romantic because romance isn't the point. Logistics are. Familiarity is. I was reading my husband's other life in a tone so ordinary it made me want to scream. I kept going because at that point not going would have been the more insane choice. Rachel thought Daniel was divorced. I know this because I found an email draft he had started and never sent to a divorce attorney in Missouri about finalizing custodial structure with former spouse in Illinois. Which made no sense because I was the spouse in Illinois and we were not divorcing. There were also insurance forms listing him as domestic partner at the Briarwood address. A utility bill in Rachel's name. Venmo payments from Daniel to Rachel with notes like zoo tickets, camp deposit, ballet shoes, cleats. There was a photo folder in his cloud drive labeled Tax Backup 2025 that contained exactly 0 tax documents and about 60 photos of Daniel with Rachel and 2 kids. Christmas morning in matching plaid pajamas. A little girl missing her front teeth sitting on Daniel's shoulders at the St. Louis Zoo. A dark-haired little boy on his lap blowing out birthday candles. Rachel leaning into him at a winery, smiling in that relaxed, unguarded way women smile when they think the person beside them belongs to them. I looked through dates like someone pressing on bruises. And there it was again. December 24, 2025. Timestamped photos of Daniel in the same blue quarter zip he wore on our FaceTime. But now he was in a warm living room beside a lit tree, kneeling next to a coffee table covered in wrapping paper. At 8:06 p.m., the exact hour he had called me from Denver, he was standing in front of a fireplace with a child in each arm. The airport background had been fake. Later, after everything blew up, I realized he'd taken that FaceTime from some airport-themed seating area in the St. Louis Marriott lobby. There was a framed photo behind him of a runway. At the time, I had registered it as stress and fluorescent lighting. When you trust someone, your brain does a lot of heavy lifting for them. I called my friend Megan because I could not be alone with what I was seeing. Megan and I met at work 7 years ago and have the kind of friendship built on Slack messages, bad conference coffee, and enough mutual oversharing to classify as emotional espionage. She answered on the second ring. I said, if I start talking and it sounds insane, don't interrupt me until I'm done. There was a pause. Then, very calmly, okay, I'm listening. I told her everything. The receipt, the iPad, the house in Missouri, the photos, the kids. By the end I was crying so hard I had to put the phone on speaker and breathe into my sweatshirt. Megan did not do the thing I secretly feared, which was soften it into confusion or caution me not to jump to conclusions. She said, Lauren, he has a second family. I remember looking at Murphy on the kitchen tile, at one of his ears flipped inside out, and thinking, that sentence just happened in my real life. Megan came over within an hour with iced coffee and legal pad energy. She sat at my kitchen island while I logged into everything I could access. And together we made a list. Save screenshots. Forward evidence to a new email Daniel didn't know about. Change passwords on my personal accounts. Move half of the joint checking into my individual account, but not all of it. Call a lawyer before confronting him. Do not call him from a place of panic. Do not tip him off. Do not let him get ahead of the narrative. It felt deranged and clinical and somehow the only thing keeping me upright. The lawyer told me the same thing 3 hours later. Her name was Denise Holbrook and she had the steady tone of someone who had seen every human Disaster twice already. I met her over Zoom from my car in a Mariano's parking lot because I couldn't stand being inside my own house anymore. She asked if I felt physically safe. I said yes. She asked if Daniel had access to firearms. No. She asked if we had children. No. She asked if I had evidence of infidelity and hidden financial activity. I laughed once, short and ugly, and said, more than I wanted. She told me not to confront him until I had secured copies of our financial records and not to leave the house unless I intended it to matter legally. She also told me, in a voice very different from her professional one, I'm so sorry. This is not normal betrayal. This is sustained deception. That phrase lodged somewhere in my chest. Sustained deception. Not a mistake, not a rough patch, not even a regular affair, if there is such a thing. A system, a schedule, a set design with receipts and calendars and holiday traditions. That night Daniel called from Milwaukee while I was sitting on the floor of our bedroom pretending I hadn't spent the day excavating his double life. He sounded relaxed, too relaxed. How's my favorite wife? He said. I had to bite the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. Fine, I said. How's packing? Almost done. You still good for Charleston tomorrow? Yep. He told me his client dinner ran long and he might drive straight from the office to O'Hare in the morning to meet me there if timing worked out. He said he missed me. He said he wished he were home. He said, I hate this travel crap, Lo. Lo was his nickname for me. Short for Lauren. He used it when he wanted to sound soft. I said, me too. Then I hung up and threw up in our bathroom sink. I didn't go to Charleston. I told my cousin I had a family emergency. Which turned out to be the truest possible version of a lie. The next morning, after Daniel's flight supposedly took off for Phoenix for another leadership summit, I did something I still can't believe I had the nerve to do. I messaged Rachel. I found her on Facebook first, then Instagram. Her account was private, but her profile photo matched the beach picture from Daniel's email thread. I stared at the message box for 10 full minutes before typing anything. There is no elegant way to tell a woman you think you share a man with her. I settled on blunt. Hi Rachel, you don't know me, but I believe we may both be involved with the same person. My husband is Daniel Collins from Naperville, Illinois. I found your address, emails, and family photos connected to him. I'm attaching our wedding photo and marriage certificate because I know how insane this sounds. I sent it and immediately wanted to crawl out of my own skin. She replied 42 minutes later. Who is this? Then, this is a sick joke. Then, call me. My hands were numb by the time I hit dial. Rachel was 35, a school counselor, and she lived in Kirkwood with her daughter Ava, who was 7. And her son Owen, who had just turned 4. Daniel had told Rachel he was divorced 3 years ago. He had also told her his ex-wife in Illinois was controlling and financially punitive, which is apparently how I was being described while I packed his vitamins in little Ziploc bags for business trips and reminded him to call his mother on Sundays. Rachel and Daniel had been together for 4 years. Owen was Daniel's son. I remember a strange little detail from that call more vividly than almost anything else. Rachel had a dryer running in the background. It kept thumping rhythmically while her world cracked open and mine met it. She kept saying, no, no, no. Then, he was here Christmas morning. I said, I know. She cried. I cried. Then we started comparing dates, and crying turned into this cold, investigative silence. She pulled up photos. I pulled up my calendar. The weekend Daniel told me he had a trade show in Minneapolis. Rachel had pictures of him at Ava's dance recital in St. Louis. The Thursday he missed my fertility consult because a flight got delayed in Detroit. Rachel had a text from him saying, running to grab cupcakes for Owen's class. The day I had a D&C after my second miscarriage and Daniel said his client dinner in Madison had turned into an overnight, Rachel had a family photo with him at Owen's preschool graduation. He was wearing the tie I bought him for our anniversary. That one knocked the air out of me in a way even Christmas hadn't. Rachel went quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, very flatly, he held my hand while I was in labor. He named our son after his grandfather. I thought I knew this man. I told her there was a lot I didn't know about Daniel's family. His dad died before I met him. His mom lives in Arizona half the year. His sister Erica and I exchanged birthday texts and saw each other at holidays. But Daniel always controlled the terms of family contact. Short visits, separate travel, lots of, they're complicated. Rachel let out this small, bitter laugh and said, "Funny, that's exactly how he described his work schedule. We talked for nearly 2 hours. She sent me screenshots. I sent her screenshots. We built a timeline that stretched back so far it turned my stomach. Based on old photos, emails, and payment records. Daniel's relationship with Rachel had started less than 2 years after he married me. Maybe earlier. Rachel had believed he rented a corporate apartment in Illinois near his office and traveled heavily across the Midwest. She had only been to Chicago once, and Daniel had met her downtown, booked them into a hotel, and framed the whole thing as a romantic child-free weekend because my ex still makes seeing the house weird. He did not rent a corporate apartment. He had our house, my lab, my monogrammed Christmas stockings, my coffee mugs, my laundry room, my entire ridiculous Costco-sized life. I asked Rachel if she had any idea he was still married. She said, "If I had known there was a wife, do you think I'd be naming a child with him?" That answered itself. At some point our conversation shifted from shock into planning, which I think is what women do when the pain is too large to stare at directly. Rachel said Daniel was supposed to be in Phoenix until Sunday. I said he told me the same. She went silent. Then she said, "He told me he had a vendor dinner in Kansas City tonight and might swing by tomorrow instead." We both sat with that for a second. There was no Phoenix summit. There might never have been. He was still triangulating, still moving between us, still actively lying in present tense, not just in retrospect. Rachel asked, "Do you want to know something that'll probably make you hate him even more?" I said, "I don't know if that's possible, but yes." She said, "He keeps a black Toomey suitcase at my place too. Same one you're talking about, I think. He told me he bought 2 identical bags because he's obsessive." I had to put my phone down. It turned out he kept duplicate toiletries, duplicate chargers, duplicate dress shoes, duplicate winter coats. He wasn't packing efficiently. He was maintaining sets. A man living out of 1 suitcase looks harried. A man living out of 2 can live 2 lives. By Friday afternoon Rachel and I had reached the same conclusion without ever saying it directly. He needed to be confronted in a way he could not charm, interrupt, or outrun. Rachel arranged for her sister to keep the kids overnight Saturday. I drove to Kirkwood that morning in my brother-in-law's SUV because I didn't want Daniel recognizing my car if he somehow saw it before pulling in. The whole drive from Naperville felt unreal. Like I was crossing state lines out of my actual life into a dramatized version written by someone who hated subtlety. Rachel's townhouse was in a neat little development with trimmed shrubs and American flags on 3 different porches. If you had told me a year ago that my husband spent half his holidays there, I would have laughed in your face. Rachel opened the door before I even knocked. She was taller than I expected, blonde, leggings and a cardinal sweatshirt. Eyes swollen from crying and lack of sleep. For one awkward second we just stared at each other. Then she said, "I am so sorry." And I said, "Me too." It was the strangest alliance of my life. Her house smelled like laundry detergent and goldfish crackers and vanilla candles. There were kids' drawings on the fridge, a pair of tiny sneakers by the stairs, a framed school photo of Ava in a navy polo. Evidence of a life so normal it made Daniel's choices feel even more grotesque. Rachel had already laid everything out on her dining table. Printed emails, Venmo screenshots, photos, the Christmas receipt, my wedding certificate, Owen's birth certificate, a lease renewal with Daniel listed as occupant, a screenshot of a text from Daniel to Rachel saying, "I hate spending nights away from my real home." That one took me out at the knees for a second. Rachel had highlighted dates in yellow. I had highlighted dates in pink. Side by side, our lives looked like 2 calendars layered on top of each other until the months were almost entirely made of lies. We decided not to scream. That was important to both of us. No kids present, no glass throwing, no reality show theatrics. Just facts. Let him lie if he wanted, but make him do it in front of both of us at once. Daniel arrived a little after 6 carrying a reusable grocery bag and wearing jeans and a navy polo. He let himself in through the garage like he lived there. Which, I guess, he did. I heard the door open. I heard his keys hit the counter. Then his voice, easy and familiar. "Hey, Rach, I brought the grill brushes you wanted in." He walked into the dining room and stopped so hard the grocery bag slipped out of his hand. For a second nobody moved. Daniel looked at Rachel, then at me, then at the table. I have never seen a human face lose color that fast. He said my name first. "Lauren." Just that, like maybe I was an unexpected coworker at a conference. Then he looked at Rachel again and said, "What is this?" Rachel laughed once, not because anything was funny. More like her body needed somewhere to put the horror. I stood up, my legs felt weirdly steady. "What is this?" I said. "You tell us." He did what liars do when the room closes in. He reached for process. "Okay," he said, palms out. "Everybody needs to calm down." Rachel actually barked a laugh at that. Daniel looked between us, already calculating. I could see it. Which version of himself might still survive? Which woman might be softer? Which fact he could concede without losing the whole map? He started with me. "Lauren, I can explain." Then Rachel. "Rach, I swear this is not what it looks like." Rachel said, "Great opening. Very original." He ran a hand through his hair. "I never wanted it to happen like this." I said, "You mean in the same room?" That landed. He tried a new angle. "Lauren and I have been having problems for a long time." I actually smiled, and that scared him more than if I'd screamed. "Then why did you text me from our bed on Tuesday telling me to order the sourdough from Dieta's?" "Because you were craving grilled cheese when you got back?" He looked at me, then at Rachel. Mistake number one. He was checking which script belonged where. Rachel said, "And why did you tell me yesterday you were in Phoenix?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was trying to manage a complicated situation. Rachel stared at him. "Complicated? You mean your wife and your son?" That was the first time Owen got named out loud. Daniel flinched. I hadn't planned to ask the question then. It came out on its own. "How long?" He looked at the floor. "How long?" I said again. 4 years, Rachel said before he could answer. "For me," I said, "for me, 9. That shut the room down. He sat in a dining chair without asking, like his legs had given out. Then came the worst part, somehow even worse than discovery. The minimization. He said he loved us both, which made Rachel stand up so abruptly her chair scraped the hardwood. He said he never meant to hurt anyone. He said it got out of hand. He said with Rachel it had started during a rough patch in our marriage. As if marriage has rough patches and therefore secret households happen naturally like mold. He said he stayed with me because he didn't know how to leave after everything we'd built. He said he stayed with Rachel because once Owen was born he felt responsible. I said, "Responsible men don't fake airport delays so they can do Christmas twice." He looked at me sharply then, because that was the first clue he had that I knew about the receipt. I picked it up from the table and held it between 2 fingers. "This," I said, "this is what did it." His eyes dropped. December 24th, 2025. Matching pajamas, cinnamon rolls, batteries, Hot Wheels, children's Motrin, a whole fake life on thermal paper. He tried, and I still can't believe this, to say it might have been for coworkers. Rachel leaned across the table and said, very quietly, "Lauren saw the pictures." And that was it. Whatever lie he had been about to build collapsed before it was fully standing. He cried then. Not big dramatic sobbing, tight, embarrassed crying. The kind men do when they realize consequences are real and suddenly want credit for having feelings. Maybe that sounds cruel, but if you had spent 2 days laying your marriage and someone else's family side by side like crash debris, you would not have had much tenderness left either. I asked him if there were any other women. He said no. Rachel asked if there were any other children. He said no. I asked if he had used our money on this house. He said some. I asked what some meant. He said, "I helped when things were tight." Rachel turned to me and said, "He paid the down payment." Daniel shut his eyes. That was news to him that it was news to me. Apparently Rachel had believed he got a bonus and wanted to invest in their future. The money had come from our joint savings. Specifically from the account Daniel told me he was beefing up because if we were going to try IVF again, he wanted us to feel secure. I laughed then. I couldn't help it. It came out ugly. IVF. Because that was the extra layer of rot sitting underneath all of this. Daniel had sat in fertility clinic waiting rooms with me. He had held my hand during blood draws. He had talked about timing and numbers and whether we should take the pressure off for a few months. All while he had a living, breathing 4-year-old son in Missouri. I said, "Did you ever even believe we had fertility problems? Or were you just exhausted from commuting between wives?" Rachel inhaled sharply. Daniel said, "Lauren, please. Please. Not sorry, not truth, just please," like my anger was the biggest inconvenience in the room. Rachel asked him if he ever planned to tell her he was legally married. He said he had been trying to find the right time. I said, before or after your child graduated college? Then he did something that, to this day, still makes my skin crawl. He looked at Rachel and said, "You knew things were complicated." Rachel went white with rage. "No," she said, "you told me your ex was vindictive and controlling and made co-parenting impossible. You said you were protecting the kids from conflict. You used that story every time you disappeared." Quote. He started saying her name, the soft tone again, trying to lower the temperature. She cut him off. "Do not use my nickname right now." Good for her. What came next was less cinematic and more sad. There was no master confession. No grand unveiling where every answer fell neatly into place. There were partial truths dragged into daylight one by one. Yes, he rented corporate apartments sometimes, but not consistently. No, Phoenix was not real this weekend. Yes, he had been rotating holidays for years and manufacturing travel chaos to cover it. Yes, he had kept duplicate clothes and toiletries in both houses. Yes, his sister Erica knew about Rachel but believed we were separated. No, his mother did not know about Owen. Yes, he had used different emotional stories with each of us to justify his absences. To me, he framed himself as overworked and loyal. To Rachel, he framed himself as wounded and trapped. Both roles required our sympathy. Neither required our informed consent. At some point Rachel told him to leave. He looked at me, maybe expecting something. Maybe mercy. Maybe a sign that one of us still loved him enough to make this less humiliating. I said, "You need to get out before the kids come back." That seemed to hit him harder than anything. Maybe because it acknowledged the children as real people with a real home and implied he was the contaminant. He stood there for another second like he didn't know where to go. Which would have been almost funny if it weren't my life. Then he picked up his keys and walked out. No big exit line, no slammed door, just footsteps through a kitchen he had no right to move through so comfortably. Rachel sat down first, then I did. We didn't hug immediately. We just sat there in the wreckage. Finally she said, "I don't know whether to throw up or file 12 things." I said, "Both, probably." And we laughed, because there was nothing else to do. I stayed in a Hampton Inn off the interstate that night because there was no universe in which I was making the full drive back safely with my head where it was. Rachel texted me after the kids came home and said Daniel didn't come back. I texted that he'd blown up my phone 14 times and left 3 voicemails. She said same. I didn't listen to them until the next day. They were exactly as pathetic as you'd imagine. He loved me. He never stopped loving me. He had made terrible choices. He wanted to explain in person. He didn't want to do this over phone. He was worried about my mental state driving alone. That one made me laugh out loud in the hotel room. My mental state, as if my mental state had happened to him. When I got back to Naperville, I changed the garage code, the alarm code, and every streaming password out of spite. Though Denise later told me the streaming passwords were likely the least relevant legal move I made all week. Daniel did not come straight home. He checked into a Marriott in Lisle and texted asking when he could get clothes. I told him Denise would coordinate temporary arrangements after I filed. I filed on Monday. Rachel filed for custody and support that same week. The next month was a blur of spreadsheets, affidavits, account statements, and the kind of administrative grief nobody writes songs about. There is something profoundly humiliating about having to document your marriage like an audit. Here is the mortgage, here are the vacations, here are the fertility payments. Here is the transfer labeled consulting that actually paid for his son's swing set. That swing set nearly broke me. Not because a child had one. Owen is innocent in this. All kids are. But because I saw the invoice and the date and realized Daniel had paid for it the same week he told me we should pause non-essential spending if we were serious about building a family. We were building one. He just didn't mean mine. His family fallout was its own mess. Erica called me sobbing 2 days after everything exploded. She said Daniel had told her Rachel was someone he'd been seeing, and that he and I were basically over. She had never met Rachel because Daniel was always weird about mixing circles. She kept saying, I should have asked more questions. I didn't have enough emotional bandwidth to comfort her. But I appreciated that she didn't defend him. His mother called a week later from Scottsdale sounding shattered and furious. Apparently Daniel had told her almost nothing real about his life for years. She knew he traveled a lot. She knew we'd had fertility struggles. She knew he had been helping a friend in Missouri. That friend, surprise, had a whole child with his face. She apologized to me in a way that felt genuine and useless at the same time. My mother, meanwhile, went into a level of practical rage I had previously only seen directed at cable companies. She came over with freezer meals, cleaning supplies, and a legal pad of her own. Brooke wanted to slash his tires, which was not helpful but emotionally on brand. Kate sent me a list of therapists and a spreadsheet template for documenting every interaction. Because she's the kind of person who survives by making columns, our friends split into categories very quickly. Some were horrified and solid. Some were so uncomfortable they practically dissolved. And a few did the thing that should be studied clinically, where they tried to preserve their idea of Daniel by framing what happened as a breakdown instead of a choice. Maybe he was in over his head. He clearly has issues. He needs help. I wanted to ask if help was what they called it when a man bought matching Christmas pajamas for his secret family and FaceTimed his wife from a hotel lobby pretending to be stranded. But I was tired. Daniel kept trying to reach me directly despite being told not to. Emails, mostly, long ones, short ones, one with the subject line "please read," one with "no excuses," one with "I'm at the house," one with "I miss Murphy," which almost sent me into the sun. I read them all exactly once and saved them for Denise. They were full of phrases like compartmentalized, ashamed, trapped, spiraled. Didn't know how to stop. Not once did he write a sentence that felt larger than himself. Even his regret was self-focused. He had ruined everything. He was losing both families. He was terrified. He was broken. I don't know what I wanted from him, exactly. Maybe nothing. Maybe a sentence with actual edges. I lied because I wanted 2 lives and trusted both of you to carry the damage. Something ugly and accurate. Instead I got wounded man poetry. The closest I came to speaking to him in person after Kirkwood happened 6 weeks later during mediation prep. He looked terrible, honestly. Lost weight, eyes sunken, wedding ring gone. He kept trying to catch my eye and I kept looking at Denise's pen instead. At one point, in a private breakout room, he said, "Lauren, for what it's worth, I did love you. I still do." And I said, "That phrase means nothing to me from you anymore." It was the calmest I'd felt since the receipt. Rachel and I stayed in touch. Which probably sounds strange from the outside but didn't feel strange at all from the inside. Trauma makes relatives out of people who would never have met otherwise. I am not saying we became best friends who brunch every Sunday. This isn't a movie. But we checked in. We traded updates through attorneys when necessary. We had exactly the same dark sense of humor about certain things, which helped. Once, when Daniel accidentally had a package shipped to my house that contained toddler rain boots, Rachel texted, "Wrong wife, apparently." I laughed so hard I cried. She eventually told Ava an age-appropriate version of the truth. Owen was too young to understand beyond. "Daddy doesn't live here anymore." That part haunted me more than I expected. Not because it softened me toward Daniel, but because it sharpened how completely selfish he had been. Adults can choose delusion if it benefits them. Kids just live wherever the earthquake lands. The divorce itself took longer than I wanted and shorter than Denise predicted. There were enough records to make his denials pointless. The financial part still hurt. I got the house, which I then sold 6 months later because every room in it had become a museum of manipulated memories. Daniel had to refinance other obligations, pay support, and liquidate some accounts he very much wished I'd never found. He lost his job too, eventually. Not because I contacted his company looking for revenge, although I'll admit the thought crossed my mind around week 2. He lost it because sustained deception has a way of leaking. Expense reports, travel reimbursements, misused corporate accounts. Turns out if you invent enough business trips, accounting gets curious. There was a grim satisfaction in that. I moved into a smaller place in downtown Downers Grove this spring. 2 bedrooms, a balcony, no formal dining room to stage a lie-in. Murphy adapted faster than I did. My sisters helped me unpack. My mom cried over where to put my Dutch oven like we were on a home makeover show. Megan came over with wine and said, "You look like yourself in here," which was the nicest thing anyone said to me all year. I still have the receipt. Not because I'm sentimental, more because I can't seem to throw it away. It lives in a folder with legal paperwork and screenshots and copies of statements. Faded now at the edges because thermal paper doesn't last. Denise told me to scan everything, so I did. The original is almost unnecessary. But every now and then I look at it. December 24, 2025. The date that collapsed the whole structure. People keep wanting one clean origin point when they hear this story. The first lie. The first affair. The first moment I should have known. I don't have that. What I have is a husband who built his life like adjoining hotel rooms with a locked door in between, and a Target receipt that got kicked underneath the wrong suitcase lining. That's all it was in the end. Not intuition, not divine justice, not some dramatic lipstick stain or perfume cloud. Just cheap paper and bad luck. A slip small enough to miss if I hadn't needed a suitcase for one stupid wedding I never even attended. Sometimes I think about Christmas Eve most of all. Not because it was the worst thing he did, although it ranks, but because I remember defending him so fiercely. Remembering how certain I was that love meant trust, and trust meant explaining away what hurt. I don't do that anymore. Last I heard, Daniel is renting a furnished apartment in Oak Brook and trying to rebuild with supervised regularity, which sounds exactly like the kind of sentence a man like him would use. Rachel says he sees Owen, which he should. Ava wants nothing to do with him right now, which I don't blame her for. Erica stopped speaking to him for a while. His mother sends polite holiday cards I never answer but also never throw away. And me, I'm fine in the least glamorous sense of the word. I go to work, I walk Murphy, I date a little, badly. I still check receipts without meaning to. I still get a weird cold feeling when someone says business trip too casually. I still have flashes where I remember some old argument or cancelled plan and suddenly understand what was actually happening that day. That part is the strangest. Betrayal doesn't end when you find out. It keeps revising the past. A concert ticket becomes an alibi. A delayed flight becomes a bedtime story for another child. A drained savings account becomes a swing set. A nickname becomes a tool. And a crumpled receipt hidden in a suitcase becomes the most honest thing your husband ever left lying around. Story number 6. My sister said I couldn't stay at her house anymore. Then her neighbor quietly slipped me an envelope. I don't think you can stay here anymore, Claire. That was it. No build-up, no softening. Just her standing behind the white marble kitchen island in her sock feet. One hand around a Stanley Cup, her expression already locked into that tight, careful look she gets when she's decided she's the reasonable one and everyone else is just reacting badly. I actually laughed at first because I thought she meant long-term. Like she was finally tired of having me in the guest room and wanted to set a deadline. I said, okay. I mean, yeah, obviously not forever. I'm still touring apartments this week. And she shook her head. No, I mean you need to leave now. Or tonight, but you can't keep staying here. It felt like the whole room went weirdly quiet around that sentence. Her kitchen was always full of noise. The built-in ice maker dropping cubes, her coffee grinder. My nephew Carter asking where his soccer cleats were. My niece Lila singing whatever was trending on TikTok that week. But in that second, all I could hear was the dishwasher humming and the little Labrador snoring. Under the breakfast table, I said, "What are you talking about?" She looked over my shoulder toward the hallway, like she was making sure the kids weren't there. Then she said, very low, "I know what's been going on with you and Grant." I just stared at her. Then I said, "What?" "My husband, Claire." I remember the exact way she said husband. Flat, possessive, humiliated. I said, "Emily, there is no me and Grant." And she gave me this look like I was insulting her intelligence. Please don't do that thing where you act confused and make me say everything out loud. That was when I realized she genuinely believed whatever she thought she knew. I was 31 at the time. Emily was 38. She lived in Franklin, Tennessee. In one of those polished neighborhoods where every house has black shutters. Every porch has matching seasonal planters. And every woman somehow looks camera ready at school pickup. Her husband Grant was 42, in private wealth management. Tall and clean-cut and one of those men who wore Peter Miller quarter zips like they were a personality trait. They had 2 kids, Carter who was 10 and obsessed with soccer. And Lila who was 8 and had strong opinions about skincare and Stanley charms. I had been staying with them for 6 weeks. It was supposed to be 2, maybe 3. I had just come out of a breakup that completely flattened my life in a way I still feel embarrassed explaining, because it sounds smaller on paper than it was in real life. I'd been living in Chicago with my boyfriend of 4 years, Ben. We weren't married, but we had a condo together, shared furniture, shared subscriptions. The dog walking app, the stupid expensive espresso machine, all of it. Then I found out he'd been hooking up with a woman from his cycling group for at least 7 months. And apparently everyone except me had picked up on it because he'd gotten careless. That word made me hate him more than the cheating, honestly. Careless. Like my life got blown up because he got sloppy with logistics. Selling the condo took longer than we thought. My company had just gone through layoffs, and while I kept my job, they cut my role to contract and I suddenly didn't have the income I'd planned around. My best friend in Chicago had just had twins and was drowning. My mom was in Arizona with my stepdad for the winter. So Emily had called and done the big sister thing. Come down here for a bit, she'd said. Regroup, save money, be around family. You can use the guest room, get your head back on straight, and figure out your next move. We had never been the most naturally easy sisters, but I believed she meant it. Emily was the kind of person who color-coded her pantry and had Christmas gifts wrapped by the first week of December. I was the kind of person who left tabs open for 3 days and had a notes app full of half-finished to-do lists. Growing up, she was the dependable one and I was the one everyone described as sensitive, which sounds cute until you realize it usually means your feelings are treated like weather instead of information. Still, we loved each other. Or I thought we did. When I moved into her guest room, I tried really hard not to become dead weight. I paid for groceries constantly. I ordered takeout for the family. I picked up Lila from dance twice a week and took Carter to soccer when Emily had appointments. I folded laundry, unloaded the dishwasher, let the dog out, and stayed out of the way whenever Grant worked from home. I even started making dinner 2 nights a week because Emily complained that if she had to grill one more chicken breast while answering school emails, she was going to lose her mind. For the first couple weeks, it actually felt kind of nice. Franklin in early spring is ridiculously pretty in this smug way. Dogwoods blooming, golf carts rolling through neighborhoods. Women in leggings and golden goose sneakers carrying iced matchas the size of flower vases. I'd work remotely from the guest room in the mornings, then help with the kids in the afternoon. Then Emily and I would watch dumb Netflix shows at night and split a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, while she filled me in on neighborhood drama that felt like its own weird ecosystem. Whose pool contractor disappeared? Which couple was quietly separated? Whose daughter got caught vaping behind the middle school? Grant was just sort of there in the background. Friendly, smooth, the kind of husband who remembered the grocery code for the gate and always offered to carry things in from the car. And then, slowly, he started acting different with me. I don't mean one big obvious moment right away. I mean 100 little things that each felt too minor to blow up over, but together made my skin start to crawl. He'd come into the kitchen while I was making coffee and stand just a little too close behind me. Instead of walking around the island, he'd comment on what I was wearing in a way that sounded casual if you repeated it out loud, but didn't feel casual in the moment. Chicago definitely did you favors. Ben was an idiot. If I were him, I would have been terrified to lose you. Careful wearing that around the house. You're going to distract people. The first time he said something like that, I laughed awkwardly because I genuinely didn't know what else to do. It was a gray area comment from my sister's husband in my sister's kitchen. I wanted it to mean less than it sounded like. Then there was the touching. Not grabbing, not anything dramatic, just the kind of contact that could always be explained if you called it out. A hand on the small of my back when he passed behind me. Fingers brushing my waist when I handed him a plate. A squeeze on my shoulder that lasted a beat too long. Once, I was reaching into the pantry for pasta and he came in behind me and said, "Need help?" even though there was nothing to help with. When I turned, I was basically trapped between the pantry shelves and his chest. He moved back immediately, smiling like nothing happened. But I stood there for a second with this horrible adrenaline flush up my neck. I told myself I was probably hyper-aware because of everything with Ben. That maybe I was raw and reading normal behavior as loaded. But then Grant started texting me. Never anything explicit. He wasn't stupid. Just little private messages that didn't need to be private. Need anything from Starbucks? You looked happier today. Good to see. You don't have to do so much around here. Emily can be intense. Then one night, after the kids were in bed and Emily was upstairs doing something with Lila's school forms, he sent me, "If you ever want to vent about Chicago, I'm a good listener." I didn't answer. The next morning at breakfast, he acted completely normal. That was the part that made it worse. He kept everything deniable and then behaved like a suburb dad in a toothpaste commercial. I considered telling Emily more than once. I really did, but if you've ever had a conversation in your head and known exactly how someone would react, you understand why I kept hesitating. Emily loved order more than truth sometimes. Not in a malicious way, just in a deeply ingrained way. She liked clean explanations. If something messy happened, her first instinct was usually to minimize it until it fit back into the life she wanted. She hated scenes. She hated ambiguity. And she adored Grant in that polished couple way where your entire identity gets braided around your marriage, your house, your kids, your social circle, your church, your vacations, your Christmas card photo. I kept thinking I needed one clear thing. One undeniable moment. Unfortunately, I got one. It was a Friday night in May. Emily had gone to a women's dinner at some steak place in Green Hills. The kids were at a sleepover 2 streets over with their friends. I had ordered sushi and was watching Love Island in the bonus room wearing bike shorts and an old Vanderbilt sweatshirt when Grant got home from a client event. He had been drinking, but not sloppy drunk. Just glossy-eyed and looser than usual. He came upstairs, saw me on the couch, and laughed. "Oh good, the house goblin lives." I said, "Hey." He loosened his tie and sat down in the armchair across from me. Not weird yet, just normal enough that I didn't want to be dramatic. We made small talk for maybe 5 minutes. His event, my apartment search, Carter's soccer tournament the next day. Then he said, "You know, Emily can be hard on people when she feels out of control." I muted the TV. "What does that mean?" He shrugged. "It means don't take it personally if she's short with you lately. She gets weird when things aren't perfect." I said, "She hasn't been short with me." He looked at me for a second, almost amused. "Not yet." Then he got up, came over to the couch, and sat down beside me instead of going upstairs. That was the first moment I felt full, actual panic. I shifted away a little and said, "Grant, what are you doing?" And he said, very quietly, "You know I've noticed this thing between us, right?" I think my body went cold before my mind caught up. I said, "There is no thing between us." He smiled, not embarrassed, not caught, just calm. "Come on, Claire." He put one hand on my bare knee. I stood up so fast I knocked a pillow onto the floor. "Don't touch me." That finally changed his face. Not guilt, irritation. He stood too. "You don't have to act like I'm some predator." I said, "Then stop acting like one." He actually laughed once, soft and disbelieving, like I was being unreasonable. "Okay, fine," he said, "maybe I read it wrong." "You read it wrong by a mile." He held both hands up. Message received. Then he added, "Let's not turn this into a whole thing." A whole thing. I went to the guest room, locked the door, and barely slept. The next morning he was already gone for Carter's soccer warm-up by the time I came downstairs. Emily was making scrambled eggs in a matching athletic set like she had stepped out of a lifestyle blog. She looked tired but normal. I almost told her then. I kept opening my mouth and closing it again. Every version sounded crazy. "Your husband touched my knee and said there was a thing between us." It sounded flimsy even though it had felt terrifying. And part of me, if I'm being honest, was still worried about what it would cost me if she chose not to believe me. So I waited one more day. That was my mistake. The next evening, Emily knocked once on the guest room door and came in before I answered. She closed the door behind her. She said, "I need you to tell me the truth." I was sitting cross-legged on the bed with my laptop open, half filling out an apartment application. I said, "About what?" And that was when she said it. "I know what's been going on with you and Grant." My whole body went rigid. I said, "He said something to you?" She laughed, but there was nothing warm in it. "Oh, so now he said something." "Emily, he hit on me." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she said, "Wow." That one word told me everything. I started talking too fast. I explained the couch, the knee, the comments, the weird texts. I told her I hadn't wanted to upset her without being sure. I said I was planning to tell her. I said Grant had been making me uncomfortable for weeks. She folded her arms and just listened with this expression that made me feel 12 years old and stupid. When I finished, she said, "You expect me to believe he suddenly did all of that out of nowhere?" I said, "Yes, because that's what happened." She shook her head slowly. "Grant told me you've been inappropriate with him." I actually felt my jaw drop. Inappropriate how? She looked almost embarrassed to say it, which somehow made it worse. "He said you kept texting him. He said you've been walking around half-dressed when you know he's home. He said last night you came onto him and when he shut it down, you got angry." I remember just saying, "That is insane." And she said, "Is it?" I stood up. "Yes, Emily, it is." She wouldn't look at me directly for a second. She looked at the dresser, then the lamp, then finally back at me. "You've been through a lot," she said. "I know that. And I know being here has probably stirred up things. But I'm not going to let my marriage get dragged into whatever this is. There is something uniquely awful about being spoken to like you're the unstable variable in someone else's clean life. I said, so you really think I would move into your house, with your children here, and start something with your husband? She said nothing. That silence was louder than if she'd said yes. I started crying then, not because I wanted to but because it just hit me all at once. The humiliation, the fear, the sheer disbelief. Emily, I'm telling you the truth. She inhaled sharply through her nose like I was exhausting her. I need you to leave before the kids get back from church tomorrow. Tonight would be better. I said, you are choosing him. And she said, I'm choosing my family. That sentence sat in my chest like a brick. I barely slept that night. I packed in this numb, robotic way. Folding clothes I'd unpacked 6 weeks earlier because I'd actually believed I was safe there. At some point I heard Grant come home and laugh downstairs with Carter over some soccer highlight video, like the entire house wasn't sitting on top of a lie. I kept thinking Emily would come back. That she'd cool off, or remember who I was, or at least ask to see the texts. She never did. The next morning the whole house had this fake normal energy that made me feel insane. Carter asked if I was still taking him for frozen yogurt later. Lila wanted to know if I'd braid her hair before church. Emily avoided me. Grant was so polished it made me sick. He even carried one of my boxes to the garage and said, "Hope everything works out," in this low voice without looking at me. If I had hit him with my duffel bag, I honestly think a jury would have understood. I had packed my car and was standing in the driveway trying not to fully lose it when their neighbor came across the street. Her name was Joanne Whitaker. Early 60s, silver bob, always in crisp linen button-downs even when everyone else was in workout clothes. She lived alone in the brick house diagonally across from Emily and Grant. I knew her in that neighborhood way. Waved at her, brought in a package once. Helped her carry a tray of potted herbs from her SUV after a trip to Home Depot. She was friendly but self-contained. That morning she walked up carrying a thin manila envelope tucked against her side. She said, very quietly, "Claire, do you have a minute?" Emily was inside. Grant was somewhere around the side yard washing his car because of course he was. I said, "Yeah." Joanne stepped closer and handed me the envelope. "Don't open this here," she said. I looked at her, confused. "What is it?" She glanced toward the house, then back at me. "It's something I think you need. Drive somewhere first." I must have looked completely lost because her face softened. Then she said, even lower, "I'm sorry no one protected you sooner." That sentence made my stomach drop. I got in my car and drove to the Starbucks on Hillsborough Road because it was the first place I could think of where I wouldn't completely fall apart in public. I parked in a far corner of the lot, turned the AC on full blast, and opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were 6 printed screenshots, a handwritten note, and an index card with a name and phone number. The screenshots were from a security camera. Joanne's house sat at an angle where her front cameras caught part of Emily's driveway and the side walkway leading to the patio off the bonus room. The timestamps were from Friday night. 11:14 p.m. Grant coming into the house through the garage. 11:32 p.m. Grant stepping out onto the side patio. 11:34 p.m. me coming out onto the patio barefoot, clearly upset. 11:35 p.m. Grant following me, cornering me near the railing. 11:35 p.m. Grant reaching for my arm. 11:36 p.m. me pulling away and going back inside alone. The stills weren't a movie, but they told the truth better than I could have. The handwritten note was on thick cream stationery in Joanne's neat, slanted handwriting. "Claire, I suspected from the way you've looked these last few weeks that something was wrong. On Friday night I checked my exterior cameras after I heard raised voices through my open kitchen window. What I saw confirmed what I was afraid of. This is not the first time Grant has behaved this way with a younger woman staying or working in that house. My niece, Madison Reed, babysat for Emily and Grant 2 summers ago. She left abruptly after an incident. Emily chose to believe Grant then, too. If you want the full story, call Madison. I'm sorry, Joanne." The index card had Madison's name and number. I just sat there staring at everything, feeling like my body couldn't process one more layer of betrayal. Not the first time. Emily chose to believe Grant then, too. I called Madison before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the 3rd ring with a cautious, "Hello?" I said, "Hi, is this Madison Reed? My name is Claire." I'm Joanne Whitaker's, well, not friend exactly, but I'm her neighbor's sister. She gave me your number. There was a silence. Then Madison said, very carefully, what happened? That told me enough before either of us said anything else. Madison was 23 by then, living in Murfreesboro, finishing nursing school. 2 summers earlier, when she was 21, she had been babysitting for Emily and Grant 3 afternoons a week. She told me Grant started small with her too. Too many compliments, a hand on her shoulder, commenting on her swimsuit when the kids were in the pool. Then late-night texts after she went home. You looked amazing today. Wish you were still here. Don't mention this to Emily. She gets jealous over nothing. Madison said she ignored him at first because she needed the money and thought maybe she was overreacting. Then one afternoon Emily got held up at Lila's orthodontist appointment and Grant came home early. The kids were upstairs watching a movie. Madison was cleaning up popsicle wrappers in the kitchen when Grant came behind her, put both hands on her waist, and kissed the side of her neck. She shoved him off and left immediately. He beat her to Emily. By that evening, Emily was texting Madison that Grant had confessed everything, that Madison had clearly developed a crush, that it would be best if she didn't come back. Madison tried to defend herself. Emily told her not to contact the family again. I was humiliated, Madison said on the phone. I was a college kid. They were rich and polished and I figured nobody would believe me. My Aunt Joanne did, but Emily didn't want to hear it. I swallowed hard. Did Emily ever see the texts? Madison let out this sad little laugh. Oh, she saw them. That made my hand tighten around the phone. What do you mean? After it happened, I sent her screenshots. She called me crying, not apologizing, just crying. She said she believed Grant had gotten inappropriate, but she needed me to understand how much the kids adored him and how destructive this would be if people found out. I said nothing because I genuinely couldn't. Madison went on. She asked me not to tell anyone at church or in the neighborhood. She said she'd handle it privately. Then a week later she blocked me. It is hard to describe what that felt like. Finding out Grant was a liar and a creep was one kind of pain. Finding out Emily had already walked this exact road before and still watched me get thrown out was another. I thanked Madison, though thank you felt absurdly small. Before we hung up, she said, for what it's worth, I'm really sorry. I remember thinking after it happened that the next girl around him was going to get blamed too. I sat in that Starbucks parking lot for probably 40 minutes after the call ended. Then I texted Emily. I sent photos of the camera stills first. Then I typed. Joanne gave me these. I also spoke to Madison Reed. You knew this had happened before. Emily didn't answer for almost 2 hours. When she finally did, it was one sentence. I don't know why Joanne is involving herself in our family, but I'm done discussing this. That was it. Not, I'm sorry. Not, let's talk. Not even denial with energy behind it. Just a wall. I ended up checking into an extended stay hotel in Brentwood that night because all the short-term Airbnbs I could find were insane and I was too fried to drive to my mom's rental in Arizona or back to Chicago. I remember sitting on that aggressively floral hotel comforter eating dry Honey Nut Cheerios out of one of those tiny paper bowls and feeling like one had somehow been demoted out of my own life. My mom called after Emily got to her first. That was another thing I learned later. Emily is never passive when she's managing a narrative. Mom opened with, honey, what on earth is going on? I said, did Emily tell you I came onto Grant? A pause. Then, carefully, she said there was some confusion in the house and feelings got hurt. I almost laughed. Feelings got hurt. I said, Grant hit on me. Emily kicked me out. Her neighbor has camera stills and there was already a babysitter. Grant did this to 2 years ago. My mom was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Claire, are you sure? That question made something in me go cold. Not angry, just cold. I said, yes, I'm sure. Mom said she needed to speak to Emily again. My stepdad later told me that call got loud enough he could hear it from the patio. Over the next 3 days, things got uglier in the deeply suburban, image-managed way that ugly family things do. Emily told our aunt and 2 cousins that I had become emotionally dependent while staying there and misread boundaries with Grant. Grant told at least one dad from Carter's soccer team that there had been some inappropriate tension in the house and they were trying to handle it discreetly. I found this out because one of the soccer moms, a woman named Tessa who had always been kind to me, texted and said, whatever they're saying, I don't believe it. If you need a place to land for a few nights, call me. That text almost made me cry harder than the betrayal had. Meanwhile, I sent Emily everything. The stills, a summary of my call with Madison, even screenshots of Grant's weird messages to me, which I had stupidly never deleted because I didn't think I'd need evidence against my sister's husband. Emily's only reply was, "You need to stop." I did stop, not because I gave up, exactly. More because I realized I was arguing with a person whose survival depended on not seeing what was in front of her. I moved into a furnished garage apartment in Green Hills owned by a friend of Tess's who was spending the summer in Charleston. It had slanted ceilings, one tiny balcony, and an air conditioner that sounded like it was preparing for takeoff every time it clicked on. It was also the first place I'd slept peacefully in weeks. I threw myself into work. My contract role got extended. I toured actual apartments again. I went on long walks around Sevier Park just to keep from spiraling. I stopped answering random numbers because Grant tried to call me 6 times from a blocked line in one afternoon. He also emailed me once. It said, "I never wanted it to become this. Emily is under a lot of pressure and things got twisted. I think it's best for everyone if we let this cool down." That was the whole email. No apology, no denial, just a corporate memo from a man who had blown up my relationship with my sister and still thought. The problem was poor conflict management. I forwarded it to myself, saved it, and never responded. About 3 weeks later, Emily showed up at my apartment. I opened the door in leggings and an old college t-shirt, holding a spoon because I had been eating Greek yogurt over the sink like a divorced man in a commercial. She looked terrible, not messy exactly. Emily never really did messy. But her blowout had collapsed, there were purple half-moons under her eyes. And she was wearing oversized sunglasses even though it was cloudy. I said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "Can I come in?" I almost said no, but I moved aside. She walked in, took one look at the tiny living room with its rented beige couch and one droopy peace lily, and started crying. That threw me so hard I just stood there holding my spoon. Emily had always been a private crier, the kind who disappeared into bathrooms at funerals. Seeing her lose it in my apartment made me feel angry and protective and exhausted all at once. I said, "What happened?" And she said, "You were telling the truth. There are sentences you imagine hearing and think will heal something. That one didn't. It just made me feel tired." She sat down on the couch and told me that 2 days earlier, she had found out Grant had been sleeping with a woman from his office for almost a year. Not only that, he had been using one of their investment properties in Nashville as the place to meet her. He'd hidden payments to her inside fake vendor reimbursements because Emily rarely looked closely at the business accounts. Apparently she only discovered it because Grant left his Apple Watch in the bathroom while showering, and messages started coming through from a contact saved under a man's name. The woman didn't know he was married, at least not at first. Once she found out, she sent Emily months of screenshots. At that point, Emily finally went back and looked at everything she had refused to look at with me. Madison's old screenshots, my messages, Grant's timeline, the camera stills Joanne gave me. She said she confronted him, and this time he admitted pieces of it. That word made me want to throw something. Pieces. As if the truth were a charcuterie board and everyone could just sample what they were comfortable with. I asked, "Did he admit what he did to me?" She nodded, crying harder. He said he misread things and panicked. I stared at her. Mistaking me for interested isn't what panicked him. Lying to you did. She covered her face with both hands. I know. And then, quieter. "I'm so sorry. I wish I could say that opened some emotional floodgate and we hugged and started rebuilding right there. We didn't." I said, "Emily, you already knew he had a pattern." She looked up, eyes swollen. "I know. No, I need you to actually say it." She swallowed. After Madison, I knew something was wrong. I knew Grant had crossed a line. I said, "And you still believed him over me?" She nodded once. "Yes." I sat in the chair opposite the couch and let that sit between us. Eventually she told me the truth in a way she probably should have told herself years earlier. After Madison, she and Grant went to counseling for about 3 sessions. He cried, said he was under stress, said the attention made him feel wanted. Said he never meant for anything to happen. Emily became obsessed with keeping the family intact. Carter was little. Lila had just started kindergarten. Their mortgage had ballooned after a renovation. Her whole life was threaded through his job, his income, his social world. So she made a bargain with reality. She would believe the version that let her keep moving. When I came to stay, and Grant started acting strange, some part of her recognized it immediately. But instead of confronting him honestly, she started watching me. She noticed if I laughed at something he said. She noticed what I wore downstairs. She noticed if I texted in the family room at night. She basically prepared herself to blame me because that was the easier story. That confession hurt more than I expected. Not because it was shocking by then, but because it was so deeply human and ugly at the same time. She didn't throw me out because she fully believed I was guilty. She threw me out because I was more expendable than the life she was trying to hold together. I said, "You chose the version that cost you me instead of him." She started crying again. I know. Then she told me the actual reason she had come. Grant had moved out into the investment condo. She was meeting a divorce attorney the next morning. Joanne had apparently told her, in very calm language, that if she tried to smear me any further in the neighborhood, Joanne would provide the camera footage and her account to anyone who asked. Tessa had also stopped inviting Emily to things. The women in that neighborhood were not saints. But they were extremely efficient once they decided a man was unsafe. Emily said, "I need to make this right." I looked at her and said, "You can't make it right." She flinched. And I wasn't trying to be dramatic. It was just the truth. There are some doors you don't get to pretend are still on their hinges. She asked if I would at least let her tell our family everything herself. I said yes, because frankly I didn't want to be the one explaining it to every aunt and cousin in a phone tree. 2 days later she sent a group message to our immediate family admitting Grant had lied, admitting she had handled it horribly, and apologizing for letting false assumptions spread about me. My mom called me crying after she got it. I said, "I'm too tired to make anyone feel better about this." She said she knew. Grant, meanwhile, went fully into self-preservation mode. Once Emily filed, he suddenly wanted to clarify misunderstandings. He emailed my mother. He emailed Joanne. He even had the nerve to message Madison from a new number saying he was saddened. She had chosen to reinterpret the past. Madison sent me a screenshot of that with the caption, "Some men really do die exactly the way they lived." That cracked me up more than it should have. The divorce got ugly fast because Grant cared about optics until money got involved. Then he cared about money. Emily found out he had opened a separate credit card she didn't know about, had been moving money between accounts, and had lied about a bonus the previous fall. Their picture-perfect marriage turned out to have termites in every wall. A lot of neighborhood truths came out too. Tessa told me 2 other women had quietly complained over the years that Grant got too flirty at parties, but because he wrapped everything in charm and because Emily always looked so composed, nobody wanted to be the one to make it a scandal. Joanne, it turned out, had been sitting on the Madison information for a long time because her niece had begged her not to create drama while she was still in school. When she saw me leaving with my car packed, she said something on my face made her realize it was happening again. I never stopped being grateful for that envelope. I think about that a lot, actually. How close I came to walking away believing I had no proof, no witness, no one solid behind me. Just my word against a polished man and the wife who chose him. Instead I had 6 grainy screenshots, a handwritten note, and a stranger's quiet decency. Emily and I didn't speak much for a while after that. Not because she didn't try. She did. She sent long texts, short texts, holiday texts, links to articles about family estrangement like she was workshopping our pain into something manageable. I answered when it involved practical things. I did not answer when it wandered into emotional self-forgiveness. The first time I saw her in person again after that day in my apartment was at our cousin Rachel's baby shower in Knoxville about 4 months later. She looked thinner, softer somehow, though maybe that was just the absence of certainty. She came over while I was putting lemon bars on a paper plate and said, "You look good." I said, "Thanks." Then we both stood there holding awkward dessert plates like middle managers at a networking lunch. Finally she said, "I miss you." I looked at her, not with hatred, that had mostly burned off by then, just with the kind of sadness that has edges. I said, "I miss who I thought you were." She nodded like she had expected that. I know. That's about where we still are, if I'm honest. Not estranged exactly, not healed, something in between. We text on birthdays. I see the kids sometimes, though never at the house because she sold it and moved into a smaller place closer to downtown Franklin after the divorce. Carter is taller every time I see him. Lila got braces and has entered an expensive clean girl era that I find both hilarious and disturbing. They know their parents are divorced. They know I don't come around the way I used to. I have no idea what version of the story they've been told, and I'm not sure I want to know yet. Grant moved to Nashville full-time and, from what I hear, is dating a Pilates instructor who is either 27 or somehow permanently styled like a 27-year-old. That detail came to me through the grapevine, not Emily. She stopped talking about him except where custody required it. As for me, I signed a lease on a place in East Nashville last fall. 1 bedroom, big windows, terrible parking, exactly mine. I got hired back full-time by my company in a better role than the one I had before everything blew up. I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped jumping when my phone buzzed after 10 p.m. I dated a little. Nothing serious. Mostly I learned that once you've been disbelieved by your own sister, your tolerance for red flags gets impressively low. Joanne and I still exchange Christmas cards. The first one I sent her after all of this just said, "Thank you for doing the right thing when it would have been easier not to." She wrote back, "You'd be surprised how often that's the only thing that matters." I still have the envelope in my desk drawer. The manila one, creased at the corners now. Her note, the screenshots, Madison's number on the index card. I don't keep it because I'm stuck. I keep it because every once in a while I need the reminder that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't careless. And I wasn't the problem somebody else needed me to be. The day Emily told me I couldn't stay at her house anymore, I thought I was losing the last piece of family I could rely on. Turns out I had already lost it. The envelope just made sure I didn't lose myself too.